And everybody please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. City Clerk, could we get a roll call?
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Gallion.
Present.
Councilmember Hundley.
Here.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Here.
Mayor Cook.
Present. Comments from the public. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item not appearing on the agenda. It is recommended that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Under state law, matters presented under this item cannot be discussed or acted upon by the City Council at this time. For items appearing on the agenda, the public will be invited to make comments at the time the item comes up for council consideration. Upon being acknowledged by the mayor, please step to the podium and speak into the microphone. Begin by stating and spelling your name.
Good evening. Gary Hermes at 12 Ramon in Rancho de Sonoma. I am so grateful for all of you for letting us continue this dialogue around our rent stabilization ordinance. This has been an unanticipated, long, drawn-out project involving hundreds of hours, and thousands of dollars of the homeowners' resources, whose simple goal is a win-win-win for the city of Sonoma, for the city, as well as for the manufactured homeowners and the park owners themselves. So tonight we wanted to share some good news. The July 17th Napa Valley Register included an article headlined, "Calistoga Prevails in Rent Stabilization Lawsuit." Here's some background. HCA, the corporation that owns Rancho de Calistoga, also owns Pueblo Serena in Sonoma. In 2010, the homeowners of Rancho de Calistoga received notice from HCA of a high rent increase. Pueblo Serena homeowners also received a letter from HCA threatening rent increases of several $100s a month. These threats prompted us homeowners in the 3 Sonoma parks to evaluate our local ordinance, hire an attorney, and begin the revision process. The Calistoga homeowners unfortunately lost their attempt to maintain their existing rents, and HCA was allowed to increase space rents $60 a month, plus a retroactive increase of $540 that was required to be paid in 2 weeks. But that didn't satisfy this park owner who sued the city. In 2013, the lawsuit was completed, and the courts found in favor of the city of Calistoga, upholding their ordinance provisions. But that still didn't satisfy the park owners who appealed on the state and federal levels. The Napa Valley Register article announces that the state has made their decision and is again upholding the city of Calistoga's ordinance. This is important for you to know because it is another victory for a small city against the frivolous lawsuits of the park owners. Please remember that this is the same corporation which owns Pueblo Serena in Sonoma. Perhaps if these corporations spent less money trying to bully small cities into submission, their bottom line would show more of a profit margin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening once again, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm Bonnie Joy Caslan, 251 Del Rio Paseo. Following what Gary has said, we would be remiss if we did not convey to you the increasing anxiety that our communities, in particular De Anza-Moon Valley, are feeling in light of the following. Number 1, the rescheduling of the study session, which was scheduled prior to the upcoming August 27th lawsuit hearing. Number 2, the pending April 28th lawsuit against the City of Sonoma because Mr. Gelfand, owner of De Anza-Moon Valley, did not get his unwarranted pass-through demand of November 12th, 2014. The June 12th, 2014 letter to the De Anza-Moon Valley community from Mr. Gelfand notifying them of the lawsuit as well as the immediate decision to proceed with the repaving of Del Rio. This road work did not meet the definition of a necessary capital improvement in that the work completed on the 9th of July, 2015, was merely a maintenance repaving to a depth of approximately 3 inches in places, not a new road replacement as outlined in the pass-through hearing. Anxiety gives way to fear, and the fear expressed by our homeowners is that of intimidation and retaliation. We, the Tri-Park Committee, are doing our best to allay those fears and have shared with our community, as we share with you this evening, that we all need to be united in putting forth a win-win-win ordinance that will mitigate fears of intimidation, future lawsuits, and potential retaliation. The recent victory, as Gary stated, of the City of Calistoga in the California Court of Appeal, written up in the Napa Valley Register July 17th, just shortly ago, hopefully will help diminish some of these overwhelming concerns and remind us all to stand tall and protect our homes, our investments, and our Sonoma way of life. We also encourage you to view the proceedings available online, Rancho de Calistoga versus the City of Calistoga, case number 12-17749, before the Ninth Circuit Federal Court of Appeal, recorded on February 2nd, 2015. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Cook, and staff. My name is Lynn Marie DeVincent. I live at 65 Guadalajara Drive in Sonoma. And I also thank you for this opportunity to speak. And I just want to make one important point today on our rent stabilization revision project. As you prepare for the next study session, please be aware that the decision matrix has 2 sections: the homeowner's provisions and the park owner's demands. These 2 divisions are not equal. The homeowner's provisions offer improvements to the processes in the ordinance to better facilitate its purpose. The revision is not being done to award the park owners with a rent increase. That is what the ordinance process is for. So, if you award the park owners with any of their 9 demands as listed in the matrix, you are in effect giving them a rent increase. If you increase the CPI from 80 to 100%, that is a rent increase. If you give them vacancy decontrol, that is a rent increase. It is actually very simple. The park owners know once the revision is completed, they can submit a rent increase application. What they're trying to do is hijack a rent increase through the revision process. Please don't allow that to happen. Please approve the provisions as put forward by the homeowners, which will guarantee the generous annual increase the park owners already get, and protect the homeowners' investments in our homes, and protect the city's right to regulate. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And as a reminder, this is comments from the public other than any agenda item. Is there any other comments from the public?
Jack Wagner, 540 Fano Lane. I did finally speak to the Board of Supervisors at their meeting about my plan to create a public bank for Sonoma County. I tied it into infrastructure and projects like SDC. It was interesting. They have the same clock that Mayor Cook just put in. They have the whole stoplight up there. They have a button on the podium that makes it go higher, which I appreciated quite a bit. Luckily, the person right before me was playing with it, so I knew it was there. And there was also a lot. If you guys remember when fluoride was on the agenda, we had at least one Santa Rosa, I think, or Sonoma County citizen that came here and kind of hijacked for a little conspiratorial rant. There was about 10 of those people organized to speak for about a half hour, just something commenting about how our leaders are murderers and Agenda 21 and all that. And made me really appreciate our public commenters in the city of Sonoma and in our style here. Everyone's very genuine, and sometimes they take the whole 3 minutes, but it's usually something very important to them, and it's just not fear-mongering and whatnot. So, yep. And today would be Brody Giles' birthday. He passed away a couple months ago. His friend just put out an album of his music, and I just actually finished listening to it right before I got here, and it was pretty amazing. And it's just really, it's a difficult thing, and yeah. So I just wanted to say happy birthday to Brody, and thank you.
Thank you, Jack. We'll continue comments from the public.
David Eicher, 1110 Loma Court. And I hope all of you have read the article in Sunday's Chronicle, headlines, "When Only the Rich Can Afford the Town, Many Healdsburg Residents Forced Out of Popular Destination." Let me read some quotes from that article. "Its fading affordability has turned this 11,000-person city into a cautionary tale. Many builders choose more lucrative single-family homes instead of multi-family dwellings. Complaints of 30 to 50% rent increases are common. Most of Healdsburg's city's employees, teachers, cops, and hospital workers live out of town." Sound familiar? In the early 1980s, the city commissioned a study from the American Institute of Architects. It suggested taking advantage of the wine country location to become a hub for destination tourism. Quote, "Healdsburg has done a very good job of moving from very slow-moving agricultural hub into a place that is a worldwide mecca," said Robert Erling, professor of economics at Sonoma State University and director of the Center for Regional Economic Analysis. But now it is dealing with the pains of that. More quotes. Though long-timers still flock to the Tuesday night concerts downtown, many notice daily life changing as the city's new residents leave houses dark Monday through Thursday. Few dispute that second home purchases are changing the city's housing stock. Longtime residents say vacation homeowners don't have the time to be invested in the community as their predecessors. Now, one of the things that's happening is that the nonprofits are losing donors because the people that have these vacation homes are not as invested in the community, and so they don't give as, the same as people that are full-time residents. And that there is donor fatigue among the stalwarts, the donors, the regular donors, because they're asked to take up the slack. More from the Chronicle. Healdsburg architect and former planning commissioner John Warden said, "It's slowly eating away the town without people knowing it. It's going to still look cute, but it's not going to be real. It's going to be a shell." So, do you want Sonoma to be just a nice place to visit, but not a place to live unless you're a millionaire? Well, here's what can be done. Number one, stop promoting Sonoma as a tourist destination. Enough tourists will still come, Sonoma will survive and grow. Use some of the hotel tax money to subsidize affordable housing. Consider promoting development of multifamily housing through zoning changes. And speaking of making housing affordable, pass a minimum wage law in Sonoma. Put more money in the pockets of the workers, and they will be able to afford to pay more for housing. 10 months ago, the City Council asked staff to have a study performed, but this was not happened because no money was allocated to the study. The city of Emeryville, population just over 10,000, voted for a minimum wage of $16 per hour in 2019. They did this without a study. The staff cited a study by UC Berkeley. So it's time to move forward with a minimum wage and forget about paying additional for a study just for Sonoma.
Thank you, David. Is there any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the council. And meeting dedications. Vice Mayor Gallion.
Both Councilmember Edwards and myself are doing a joint dedication. I'll speak first, and then Councilmember Edwards will speak second. But we wanted to go ahead and dedicate this meeting to the victims of the Chattanooga shooting. As a member of the organizations here in Sonoma, the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and Wine Country Marines, and most important, the mom of a Marine. I just wanted to say that I was very upset and certainly was feeling very sympathetic and careful to go ahead and not become overwhelmed by the feelings that were expressed, last week when the Marines were shot. I just, I feel compassionately that their names need to be remembered. There are many stories about them. Most are married, have children, but there's one who's very young who was actually just happening to be there at the recruitment center, and he was on a training. This is something after boot camp, having passed that ordeal. He was going for a short two-week training, just happened to be at that particular place at that time. So in an effort of Marine families, and I will say that there was a naval petty officer as well, but the Marines are a very close-knit group, and I myself have seen benefit from belonging to the Wine Country Marines while my son was serving. And I just would like to go ahead knowing how intensely this affects all the families, the children, the brothers, the sisters, the spouses, the parents, that I think a show of this particular community with a letter of support for this family would be in order. With that, I'll read their names. There's Gunnery Sergeant Thomas Sullivan, who was 40 years old. Staff Sergeant David A. Wyatt at 35 years old. Sergeant Carson A. Holmquist, 25 years old. Lance Corporal Squire K. Wells, 21 years old. And the Navy Petty Officer, 2nd Class, Randall Smith, 26.
If I could just add, please keep all of these people in mind as you go through your day and your week. And as a supporter of the Wine Country Marines, we put on their birthday ball every year here. And what they do is they care for wounded veterans and their families. Most of the VA hospitals are on the West Coast or the East Coast, and a lot of the Midwestern families have no opportunity to travel, so that's what we raise money for. And just maybe a moment of silence for these young people. Thank you.
Do we have any other meeting dedications? Seeing none, if I could have the family of Adam Kaiser come to the podium, please. On behalf of the City of Sonoma, I would like to dedicate a proclamation to end bullying in the honor of Adam Kaiser. Whereas, in honor of Adam Kaiser, his grieving family, and all their other individuals, both young and old, who have had to endure bullying, we agree that people of all ages and abilities have the right to be safe from physical and emotional attack. Any form of behavior that is threatening, harassing, bullying, abusive, or dangerous must be stopped. Families, schools, youth organizations, colleges, workplaces, places of worship, and other groups are responsible for empowering and protecting their members and for promoting cultures of caring, respect, and safety for everyone. Adults are responsible for taking leadership to ensure that unsafe or harmful behavior is clearly against the rules, that everyone understands the rules and these rules are upheld. Procedures are clearly understood by everyone, need to be in place to deal with these problems that come up in a prompt, fair, open, and effective fashion. Everyone in position of leadership is responsible for modeling consistent, powerful, and respectful behavior, and for intervening to address unsafe behavior. Everyone has a responsibility to behave in ways that are safe and respectful to others. Anyone who feels threatened, upset, or endangered by someone's behavior, or who sees this happening to someone else, has both the right and the responsibility to speak up. Most people are empowered when they know how to take charge of their own safety, how to act safely towards others when if feel frustrated or upset, how to intervene, and how to advocate effectively. People of all ages and abilities have the right to develop understanding and skills through high-quality programs that give them opportunity to be successful in practicing in contexts that are relevant to their lives. Now, therefore, I, David Cook, the Mayor of Sonoma, have set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Sonoma to be affixed this 20th day of July 2015 to stop bullying. Thank you. Thank you. We'll go ahead and move to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. At this time, council may decide to change the order of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'd like to, oh, I'm sorry.
We'll go ahead and go to the public. Is there any comments on the consent calendar? Seeing none, I will come back to the council.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to approve the consent agenda from items 4A to 4M.
I'll second.
Is there any other discussion on the consent calendar before I call for a roll call vote? City Clerk, could we call for a roll call vote on items 4A through 4M on the consent calendar?
Councilmember Edwards.
Aye.
Councilmember Gallion.
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Mayor Cook.
Aye. For public, the City Council just approved the consent calendar from 4A through 4M, which was all the items on the consent calendar. This takes us to the successor agency. Approval of the portions of the minutes of June 15th and June 22nd, 2015 City Council meetings pertaining to the successor agency. Is there any questions? Comments from the public? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council for discussion and action. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I'd like to go ahead and approve the portions of the minutes of the June 15 and June 22nd City Council meeting pertaining to the successor agency.
Is there a second?
Second?
Agramonte, second. Any other discussion? Councilmember Edwards.
I was not in attendance for the June 22nd meeting, but I'll go along with the June 15th.
Okay. City Clerk, seeing a motion and a second, can we call for a roll call vote?
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Gallion.
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Mayor Cook.
Aye. For public understanding, we just passed 5-0 the approval of the minutes of June 15th, June 22nd for the successor agency. We do not have any public hearings tonight, so we're going to move to the regular calendar, City Council as a successor agency. Item 7A, discussion, consideration, and possible action to adopt a resolution of the City Council as a successor agency to the former Sonoma County Development Agency, approving the issuance of refunding bonds and other related actions. Finance Director, there you are.
Good evening, Mayor Cook, members of council. The item before you this evening is in your role as a successor agency to the Sonoma Community Development Agency. The Sonoma Community Development Agency was dissolved in 2003 by state action, and at that time there were 3 bond financings remaining open. Those financings are paid using redevelopment property trust tax funds. Each month the city submits a request to the Department of Finance, who approves those payments. Recently we identified that 2 of those bond issuances, those issued in 2003 and in 2011, totaling approximately $30 million, have some potential interest savings to the city if they are refunded at this time. This process includes moving this item to the Oversight Board and the Department of Finance for approval. But if approved, savings overall over the life of these loans could exceed $3 million. Those amounts will change as we go through the process, as interest rates will continue to fluctuate. Again, those debt savings are distributed amongst all taxing entities that were part of the Redevelopment Property Tax Trust Fund, but the city will realize approximately $20,000 in annual savings. So you'll see this item come back to you after approval by the Department, if approved by the Oversight Board and the Department of Finance. This item will return to you in approximately September. And I'm available for questions.
Does any of the council have any questions for Deanne? Seeing none, I will bring it to any council questions. Then I'll go ahead and open it to the public. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I will bring it back for discussion and action on this item. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I just wanted to say that I commend you for, the actions that the city is taking in this particular respect, because at this time to be able to go ahead and save money, all right, by doing these particular efforts is being done in a lot of local agencies due to the rate in which the financing has dropped to. And thank you for considering that yet another council goal about finance, being prudent, and leadership in that area. So congratulations.
Is there any other council discussion? I just want to say, Deanne and Carol, thank you for the good work on this. And to adopt this resolution, do we have a motion? Vice Mayor Gallion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve. This is a big one. Okay. A resolution of the successor agency to the former Sonoma Community Development Agency approving the issuance of refunding bonds in order to refund certain outstanding bonds of the former Community Development Agency of the City of Sonoma, approving the execution and delivery of a supplement to indenture of trust relating thereto, approving the execution and delivery of an escrow agreement relating to the bonds being refunded, requesting Oversight Board approval of the issuance of the refunding bonds and the approval of such professional services contracts, requesting certain determinations by the Oversight Board, and providing for other matters properly relating thereto.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other council discussion? Seeing none, City Clerk, could we call for a roll call vote?
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Gallion.
Aye.
Councilmember Hundley.
Aye.
Councilmember Agramonte.
Aye.
Mayor Cook.
Aye. And for public, we just approved 5-0 the resolution of the City Council as a successor agency to the former Sonoma County Development Agency approving the issuance of refunding bonds and other related actions. With that, we're going to go ahead and move to 6A, which is discussion, consideration, and possible action to increase regulations on the use of leaf blowers. City Manager and Planning Director.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Cook, members of the City Council. At your council meeting on March 2nd, city staff gave an overview of the city's current regulations concerning the use of leaf blowers. The current regulations have been in place since 2011. Following staff's presentation, council accepted public comment on reopening that discussion on the regulation of leaf blowers in the city limits. On a vote of 3-2, with Council Member Edwards and Mayor Cook dissenting, council directed staff to return the item to a future agenda, which is this evening, with options including a review of the rules with the other Sonoma County jurisdictions. Staff has surveyed other agencies in and around Sonoma County and has prepared a matrix which is included in your agenda. Of the 11 agencies surveyed, only 2, Rohnert Park and Healdsburg, have regulations on leaf blowers. From staff's additional research, should council wish to modify current regulations, some options open for council consideration may include 1, further limitation on hours, and days of operation. 2, further lowering of the decibel levels currently in our current regulations. 3, limiting leaf blower use to commercial and mixed-use zones only. 4, prohibit leaf blowers powered by an internal combustion engine or by a portable or mobile generator powered by an internal combustion engine, which was the basis for the 2013 ordinance, which was not subsequently adopted. Or number 5, adopt regulations prohibiting leaf blowers from being operated in a manner that directs dust and debris into any neighboring parcel or public street, which also was included in the 2013 ordinance. So tonight, staff is seeking specific direction from council, should the council choose to move forward with any modifications to our existing regulations. So with that, that concludes staff's portion of this presentation, and we await direction from council.
Thank you. Is there any questions on the council before we go to public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and open this item. Before you step to the podium to speak, I would like to say a few rules. We're going to limit it to 3 minutes. There will be no clapping, but if you do agree, go like this so we know. I do want to make sure we do have police officers outside who may come in. I would not like to see any harassment during these proceedings because I want everybody to feel safe in the environment of the City Council. With that, if you would like to go ahead and speak.
Thank you. I'm Georgia Kelly at 600 Mitchell Way in Sonoma. As you know, a previous City Council did ban leaf blowers almost 2 years ago. And because one City Council member changed his mind 2 weeks later, we're back here tonight with a lot more signatures and a lot more support for banning leaf blowers across the board. Sonoma Neighbors Against Leaf Blowers is submitting a petition tonight with close to 700 signatures from people, residents of Sonoma, business owners in Sonoma, and people working in Sonoma businesses who have signed this petition hoping to ban leaf blowers across the board. I will submit this before I finish. Some of the signatures also, there are 226 from the petition 2 years ago, so we have over 800, close to 900 signatures altogether. I want to address a few things that council members have brought up to some of our people that they're concerned about with banning leaf blowers. And one was the suggestion that there be a referendum, that the citizens would vote on whether to ban them or not. Our group totally opposes that because the City Council was elected to make decisions about things like this. This is your area of you have that purview to actually make these decisions and save taxpayers the money that it would cost to do a special election. So we do oppose a referendum. The other that's come up also in the report we just heard was restricting hours. We already have restricted hours on the use of leaf blowers, and this has been totally unenforceable. And I believe it will continue to be unenforceable because some people don't know the hours, other people don't care what they are, and they're violated all the time. It would be like saying, well, in a restaurant, we'll allow you to smoke between 4 and 6, but at 6 you have to stop. That's not really enforceable. At 6:05, someone might still be smoking or still not want to stop. So having a ban across the board, it's very clear what the rule is. And I don't think there's any problem with enforcement, and if there would be, the Sonoma Neighbors Against Leaf Blowers are very happy to help the police enforce that ban, by calling them, of course, not by interfering. I just returned from Europe where I was in 6 different major cities, saw no leaf blowers, heard no leaf blowers, and know it's possible. And many cities in California, as you know, have already banned them, and especially tourist cities like Santa Monica, Hermosa Beach, Carmel, Del Mar. So this is one of the cities that's supposedly a tourist destination but has all this noise. So that's another thing I think to think of in promoting Sonoma. I'm hoping that tonight For those of us, just want to mention quickly that those of us who work at home, myself included, there are 2 mornings a week I cannot work because of leaf blowers in Olson Park across the street and a neighbor on the corner on Thursday. So I think a lot of people are in that position, and I want to urge you tonight to actually vote on this and hopefully ban leaf blowers in Sonoma. Thank you. Who should I give these to?
City Clerk, please. Thank you. Is there any other comment from the public?
Good evening, Mayor Cook, Council. My name is Bernie Kraus. I live at 13012 Henno Road in Glen Ellen. And I am qualified as an expert witness in both state and federal court in the field of audio forensics. My PhD is in bioacoustics, and I study the effects of sound on organisms, both human and other. One of the things that I want to talk about tonight is the fact that I've got a book coming out also in a couple of weeks, published by Yale University Press. And in it, it has a chapter on noise and the effects of noise on human beings. And I want to refer to 4 references that I'm using in that book because they speak to the issue very clearly, and certainly the physiological and psychological effects on humans of noise. The first, these 4 range over 33 years. They begin in 1982. It's a French study on sleep and the effects of noise on people trying to sleep, and the glucocorticoid enzyme levels, the stress levels that are increased as a result of noise. The second is 2002, a study done by Montana State University on wildlife and the effects of noise on wildlife, which also accrues to human endeavor as well. And the third is from the European Union in 2011 about noise. And by the way, the European Union is about 20 years ahead of the United States in terms of noise monitoring and also effective noise policing. And the fourth one is the last study is World Health Organization. And I want to read, what's interesting about all 4 of those studies is they're all very independent and they come to the same conclusion. And I want to read just some of these conclusions so you get a sense of where we're at with this. It is estimated that people working in noisy environments are a factor of 6 more likely to need stress reduction medication prescriptions due to noise than any other factor. It includes Ativan, Librium, Valium, Paxil, and Xanax, meds needed to help reduce the impact of these symptoms. Number 2, there's a direct relationship between noise in a child's environment and his or her task performance. When a particular task requires high levels of concentration and unrelated distracting noise intrudes, a greater allocation of attention, often beyond a child's ability to engage, will measurably interfere with execution. Number 3, exposure to noise during critical periods of learning in school impairs development and has a lifelong effect on educational attainment, sometimes affecting IQ by between 5 and 10 points. The report went further, concluding that exposure to excessive noise not only impairs learning in young humans, but can also, due to epidemiological level increases in blood pressure and release of stress hormones, lead to heart attacks or even death, a negative environmental condition rated second only to air pollution. I want to encourage the council to really think carefully about these issues, particularly the health issues, which are so prominent and obvious in all of these conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and your address.
Okay. Josette Rose Eicher, 1110 Loma Court, Boys Hot Springs. Usually it's another family member that gets up and talks at these things, but an incident, right, I'm so short, I need this down here. Usually it's another family member that gets up and talks at these things, but an incident last week inspired me. Our next door neighbor had hired a man to cut hedges with a gas-powered trimmer. He looked to be about in his 30s or so and had with him a 12-year-old boy. After the noise and pollution went on for a couple of hours, I then heard a leaf blower start up, even louder than the trimmer. I looked over and the man had strapped a gigantic gas-powered leaf blower onto the child's back. Neither of them had a mask, ear, or eye protection. The child almost tipped over while the man held him up and pointed him about to blow the recently trimmed debris around. As these neighbors can be a bit volatile at times, I refrained from going over and intervening, even though I thought this bordered on child abuse. Though I'm not a resident of the city of Sonoma and live in the Springs, I am here to not only urge you to ban gas-powered leaf blowers, but to embark on an education campaign to inform the public, both the users of the things and the people who hire them, about what they do to people and the environment. If the city does this, it may spread county-wide and get discussions started so these things can be outlawed on a widespread basis, not just city by city. The city should be the bully pulpit for getting this info out there. Gas-powered leaf blowers are harmful to people, creating dust, exhaust, pollution. They are completely useless. They blow things from one place to another, making your dirt and debris someone else's dirt and debris. They are an environmental nightmare. They blow off the decomposing leaves and natural material that are mulch for our oak trees, thus contributing to unhealthy trees and the spread of sudden oak death. As one of our local veterinarians pointed out recently, they are extremely harmful to small animals. Then, of course, there is the noise factor. Yes, it may cost more to get electric models, and I would like to see these phased out too, or use rakes and brooms. But through education, you can get the word out. Yes, it would be good to charge more for your services, and yes, you can pay a little more for the labor because of the good it does for our environment and quality of life. So I urge you to not only ban, but to spend some money on outreach and education. Thanks so much.
Thank you. David?
David Eicher, 1110 Loma Court. I was hoping the monitors were up. I got a whole presentation, but I guess we're not, so that's okay, I can speak to it. A friend of mine put this little presentation together, and it's based off of an Edmunds.com study. They did a study based off gas-powered leaf blower versus a 2011 Ford Raptor pickup truck. And they looked at the grams per minute of various pollutants from the leaf blower and the Ford pickup truck. And in some cases, the leaf blower was like almost 4,000 times grams per minute because it's a two-stroke engine. And to equal the hydrocarbon emissions of about a half an hour of yard work with this two-stroke leaf blower, you have to drive a Raptor for 3,887 miles, or the distance from North Texas to Anchorage, Alaska. So 1 hour leaf blowing is equal to 7,774 miles. 200 leaf blowers blowing for 1 hour is 1.5 million miles, say in a month. So if you take that times 12 months, you get over 18 million miles per year equivalent. So if you've got 200 leaf blowers for 15 minutes, that's equal to 104,000 Ford pickup trucks driving 4.5 miles, about 15 minutes per month from Napa Road to Agua Caliente. Or in other words, for over 12 months, 104,000 Ford trucks, that's over 1.2 million trucks. So last year, there was about 14,000 vehicles a day on Highway 12 by the plaza. There's about 5 million vehicles per year. So basically, a leaf blower, 200 leaf blowers running for 15 minutes a year is about 1/4 of the 5 million vehicles per year. So if you get rid of gas-powered leaf blowers, you will be equivalent of taking almost 1 million Ford pickup trucks off the road. So conclusion, well, we can retrofit gas leaf blower engines with Ford truck motors and reduce pollution of the gas leaf blowers by 7,000%. Yeah, it'd be a little hard to carry on your back, I guess. Or allow only electrical leaf blowers and reduce pollution in the city of Sonoma by the equivalent of 1.2 million pickup trucks traveling through the city a year. This has the effect of reducing a vehicle carbon footprint by 25% in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Connie?
Mayor Cook and city council members, my name is Connie Gustafsson. I live on 21400 Broadway here in Sonoma. I'm the owner and operator of Scandia Landscaping, and I've been doing it since 1982 here in Sonoma. I don't think none of us like blowers, especially us who carry them on the back. Unfortunately, it is a good help for us today, and a lot of stuff have happened on the technology when it comes to blowers. If you use the modern blowers, less decibel, and you keep the RPM down, and something I think that's even more important, if you follow the current city noise ordinance. Unfortunately, when I talk to a lot of friends and clients in town, and when I drive around town, I see people operating blowers off hours, Saturdays, Sundays, when people like to sit home and have a nice dinner or sit out in the gardens. And I can understand that that really aggravates people. I did some non-scientific numbers. I estimate we have probably about 200 to 250 individuals operating as landscapers and gardeners in this town. Some are by themselves, some have a couple of employees helping them. The city has issued about 70 business licenses. To operate a business in Sonoma, you have to have a city business license. So out of these 200 to 250, 70 are licensed by the city. Another regulation the city requires is you have to have a name and a phone number on the side of your truck. The reason for that is if there are complaints, which we get, I receive and many others, they can look at the truck and call in and voice their complaint, and we can try to solve it. But if you have 100 to 150 operator out there with no business name and no phone number, and if you operate off hours, Saturdays, Sundays, early mornings, on weekdays, or weeknights, it's very aggravating. And I'd like to ask city staff, how many citations?
Direct it to the mayor, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. How many citation has been issued when it comes to blowers? And I think of course it's hard to enforce it, but we have rules now with watering, and I know the city has started an issue of citation if you water the wrong time, which is positive that you're doing that. And I think the same thing if you follow up and after people who are misusing, and not just blowers, but also noisy equipment. And I think that would help a lot to start with. Enforce the current noise regulations.
Thank you, Connie, and all questions will be asked by the mayor after comment that we feel need to be asked. Edmund?
Good evening, council. My name is Edmund Joseph. I'm a landscaper here in town of Sonoma. I started mowing when I was 12 years old, and that was from paper route money. Learned a trade from my immigrant parents. Had a company in Redwood City, sold it and came here. 24 years ago, I was told I'd never make it in this town. Started solo, now I have 7 workers. Sonoma has been very good and fair. Now we have folks that want to stop me from making my living. I am currently in compliance regarding leaf blowers use in the city of Sonoma. I feel any other restrictions beyond the current ones would hamper my ability as a local businessman to provide for my family and create economy for my workforce, who in turn provides for their families. As one of my clients who lives in the city of Sonoma stated, she would not be able to support the extra labor cost incurred to maintain her property at the level it is maintained today without the use of leaf blowers. Without the safe and conscious use of a leaf blower as a landscaping tool, my client's property would suffer greatly in eye appeal and safety. I would like to praise the property owner and the city of Sonoma taxpayer who took the action by running a generator to excuse me, to avoid the regulations for the gas leaf blower. Instead, he powered the electric leaf blowers with his generator. As a licensed, bonded, and insured landscape contractor, I've instructed and trained my workforce to comply with current ordinances by using safe, practical, and careful use of the said tool. My work crew has been trained to be conscientious as to where ultimately the dust and debris go. In closing, my hopes as a longtime small businessman who has always supported local business, be it my landscaping business or my personal life, who has daughters who have successfully matriculated through the local schools, as a supporter of local sports, I am confident that we can move towards a common sense solution in which small local landscapers can continue to contribute to our local economy and our customer base can continue to support us. Thank you, City Council.
Thank you.
I'm sorry if I was a little emotional.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tom Wright. I live at 453 East Napa Street. I moved to this beautiful town from Belvedere, little town in the other county. Oh, and by the way, to address the previous comments, take a little tour around Belvedere and see how to seed what a negative impact the leaf blower ban had on those properties. When the leaf blower debate was going on in Belvedere, the leaf blower proponents were making the very same arguments that we're hearing tonight in Sonoma. My rates will skyrocket, I'll lose customers, I'll have to lay off a lot of my guys. Those arguments were then and still are, 18 years later, totally specious. None of those arguments came to fruition, not one. Though rates skyrocketed, no one lost any business, and nobody, and trust me, people in Belvedere watch their dollars just as closely as people in Sonoma. That's why they have so much more of it. None of the guys lost their jobs. Not one single guy lost his job because of the leaf blower ban. The only thing that changed was our quality of life, and it improved overnight. Besides the lack of disruptive noise, there was an immediate drop in incidents of respiratory distress, most markedly amongst children and the elderly, the most precious members of our society. This is not about regulation at all. It's about quality of life in our beautiful little town. How can the first town in the United States of America to qualify as a Chicxulub city even need to debate this ban on one of the most polluting, peace-disturbing machines in existence? As a resident of a town, and getting back to this presentation, I'm a living example of this town who supposedly cherishes its veterans. I wonder how many of us in this room have ever been on the receiving end of a minigun, a mini Gatling gun made by General Electric called an M134. I have been on the wrong end of one, spending 39 months pulling out downed pilots out of North Vietnam and Laos. These mini guns were door-mounted mini Gatling guns, cool little tools, capable of firing 3,000 to 6,000 rounds per minute, and they sound just like leaf blowers. I've seen friends transformed into foamy pink clouds right before my very eyes. That's what these things do to people. They're still using them today, by the way. And that's those little things, they're really hard to forget, hard to compartmentalize. I wake up in an adrenalized rush almost every morning of my life because of these leaf blowers. And as y'all well know, I have the most powerful and effective leaf blower in Sonoma. If you saw the campaign sign on East Napa Street, you'd know I'm out of time, but there's a wonderful little list of towns and cities in California. I'm going to take 2 seconds. Belvedere, Berkeley, Beverly Hills, Carmel, Claremont, Del Mar, Hermosa Beach, Indian Wells, Lawndale, Laguna Beach, total ban, several of these total bans. Los Altos, Los Angeles, Menlo Park, Mill Valley, Piedmont, Santa Barbara, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, and that's just of 1997. How can we not be on that list?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joel Bickford. I live on 6th Street East here in Sonoma. Joel Bickford on 6th Street East. And I'd like to make a few points from what I think is the silent majority. I think that, used properly, leaf blowers are effective tools. They can be used to blow debris into an area that catches debris. There are, opponents are, quick to point out cities that have banned them. But I'd just like to point out there are 482 municipalities in the state of California, and all but a handful, currently allow people to use, tools that they think are effective for cleaning their property. Another point, you can't reasonably ban everything that everybody finds objectionable. People find string trimmers, hedge trimmers, dogs. Some people even, don't like the noise that children make. But if we start going down the road of banning everything that somebody doesn't like, where are we gonna ultimately end that? And then my final point, if you look at the total cumulative number of square miles in the city of Sonoma, incrementally it may not seem like that much of an extra burden to switch from blowing to raking and sweeping, but that effect is cumulatively multiplied over all the square miles within the city. So, thank you.
Thank you. We'll continue with public comment.
Hi, I'm Matt Metzler. I live at 1110 Friar Creek Drive in Sonoma, and I'm an avid bicyclist. I rode my bicycle here tonight, and I've been a bicyclist for 40 years, averaging 50 miles a week. And I ride a lot with Sonoma Valley cyclists, and we ride pretty fast. A lot of times I average 20 miles per hour, and the big reason I'm objecting to leaf blowers is because a lot of times the operators don't realize that they're upwind. And many operators of leaf blowers are very courteous and will stop when they see a bicyclist or a pedestrian coming. But they don't realize, how fast we're going, that I'm still going to be, in that cloud. Even if they stop when they see me when I'm 50 feet or 100 feet away, I still have to ride through the cloud of debris that they've blown up into the street. So I really don't like to have to ride through or walk through the cloud of debris that's created by leaf blowers. I really like the idea of what was proposed in the initiative before about not allowing them on public sidewalks or roads. However, that would basically, I think, effectively eliminate most leaf blower use. If people want to use it on their private property and blow leaves around on their private property, as long as it doesn't blow onto the public street or sidewalk, that's their business. But where I live in Friar Creek, we have a bike path, we have the creek, we have a park. There's a lot of pedestrians and bicyclists, a lot of people pushing strollers. I really like living in a neighborhood that's very, very bicycle and pedestrian friendly. When there's leaf blowers operating, it is not bicycle and pedestrian friendly. I'm willing to bet that everybody who's in favor of the leaf blower ban, their primary method of transportation is driving. It doesn't bother you if you're driving in a car with the windows closed and the AC on. I walk a lot, I bicycle a lot. It really bothers me to have to go through that cloud of debris that's created by the leaf blowers. A couple of years ago, I took advantage of the city's Cash for Grass program and ripped out my lawn. And I have a bunch of drought-resistant native plants growing in my yard. And I don't rake leaves. The debris that falls from well, actually I do when the big trees, but I use a rake once a year in the fall. But the debris that comes, the plant debris is good for mulch. It's good for the soil. It is better for the soil to leave that stuff on the ground. I've had too many times when I see the neighbor who pays somebody to chase a couple leaves around because they have to do something to earn their landscaping contract. Anyway, I just hope you guys will vote to ban leaf blowers for the health and safety of pedestrians and bicyclists in Sonoma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on up here, Pop. Okay, my name is Dennis Estrubel. I live at 1190 Elm Avenue. I'm outside the county.
Excuse me, I didn't get your name. Could you say that slower?
Dennis Estrubel. Astrubel. I live at 1190 Elm Avenue. I'm outside the county limits. I do have asthma. I do have allergies. and I do not have that much problems around blowers and everything. It's the plants. But I do own a machine which is called a Carve-Right carve machine. And I'm afraid if you ban blowers completely, someone's going to mistake my machine for a blower, turn me in during normal business hours. Then I'm faced to show off my machine to someone. And, it's just going to say, oh, it's not a blower. But it makes a little bit more noise than it. And, when I bought it, I really didn't know how much noise it actually made. But, you need something to do some blowing. And I think if you started going to professional style blowers for these contractors and everything, you're going to end up opening up a new wave of thieves who are going to steal the batteries just for all the lithium in there. I mean, you have like bunches of batteries back there to power all the units all day long. And I mean, these guys see maybe 20 batteries back there. They're going to say, oh boy, let's just take them all. I mean, that's the truth. I mean, there's people around here who will steal the smallest items if they can get a hold of them. And I say, that's one of the problems. But I do have an older blower that's electric, and I figured out that if you actually shorten your tube down to half of what a gasoline power motor does, just shove it in there, put a couple screws in it, and it's made by Toro. I mean, you end up increasing the power for it, and it's still electric. And I mean, they're cheap, but it's what's going to happen with the professional. Are they going to have to carry a couple car batteries? I mean, it's excess weight that they're going to have to figure out where to put it, or use electric somewhere to do the job. I mean, it's always noisy work. I've done it for over 20 years. And, I wish I could do it now, but I'm disabled. I'd love to get out there, but I can do what I do for a little bit, and that's it. So I'm just really bringing up the point that, some people do know how to use a blower properly, and some people aren't paying attention, especially on the roadways, and I've seen it in town. And I mean, they're just not paying attention. They start blowing, and here comes the big, just a bunch of dust and everything. There's nothing on that road. It's just they're not paying attention where that deal is pointed at, and that's that. I mean, banning something? I mean, what we're going to go to? Vacuums? I mean, if your bag gets clogged up, it's going to still push some stuff out, depending on how many microns that bag is. I mean, if it's really a good bag, then it's not going to blow stuff out anymore.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's first come to the mic, first served.
Good evening. I did not come here tonight to speak, but here I am. I'm Joyce Parsons. Grew up in Sonoma, started first grade at the community center, love life here, lived on East MacArthur, live out towards Glen Ellen now. We have 2 neighbors, and that's all. And they're San Francisco, one's a Marin person. They're usually up just weekends. This weekend, there were a lot of kids next door having a birthday party, swimming in the swimming pool. And my thought was, can't go out, can't use the electric blower today because of all the children that were in the pool. So I swept my long driveway and kept thinking about this meeting tonight. And before I finished, I picked up some debris that I'd love to pass around. If you look at the bottom of this, you would see what would be in the swimming pool next door or in the kids' hair if I had done it the not kind way. I'm glad I did it the kind way. I personally do not like noise. I have a hearing issue, which is called hyperacusis. I'm 1 in 50,000 with extreme sensitive hearing. I don't even have a television on in my house. I go home, I like quiet. And I think of all the people that have to live in town and have noise surrounding them all the time, whether it's cars at stop signs or whether it's blowers. And I feel sorry for the guys that are working in the field because I know that's their job. And I know a lot of these guys. I see a lot of these guys. But you know what? this is the kind thing to do. May I just pass this
If you want to
around?
hand that to the city clerk, I think she really wants it.
Thank you. I'm taking my milk home. Bye.
Thank you.
Good evening, Councilman. I've been gardening for, I guess, when I got out of high school.
Could you get your
Oh,
name?
I'm sorry. My name is Jeff Resendez, and I've been in Sonoma. Resendez. And I've been doing gardening here in Sonoma for the last 30 years or more. But when I got out of high school, I just took anything because you can't stay at home. You got to go to work. So I wound up doing farm work, and I worked I think 4 years. And before blowers were there was noise. There's always been noise since day one. I don't know if I'll ever get away from noise. I go home, I relax, and the neighbor's moving barrels around, you know. And he's the nicest guy you could ever meet, you know. I don't know if we'll ever get away from noise. Now, the blower does the job of the rake, okay? It does the job of the broom. And it does it better than the broom and better than the rake, and it does it faster. I have a broom in my trailer, and I have a rake. I do use a rake, and I do use a broom, but that blower goes out every time. Every time. I don't use a broom that much, and I use the rake to pick up what's there. But I don't use the rake I have to be efficient because I have to be competitive. There's a lot of guys out there, and there's new guys coming in. So I can't see where if the blower is banned, and we go back to, I guess that they're trying to invent some blower that does less noise, and that's fine with me. But to eliminate the blower altogether, that's going back. That's not progress. I really understand these people, you know, because I've seen people get very upset. It doesn't have to be a blower. It could be a car going by, you know, and kids playing around, or somebody just trying to be smart, you know. It's the only way that he can get off to be a man, you know. And that's what I've learned. There's a lot of kids that don't want to settle it. They just want to go out and make noise. Well, they probably don't know how to take care of themselves. So they go out and make a bunch of noise. And this is what bothers people. Even a blower. You hire a guy, and he does not use a blower. Now, that's true. Here he is making dust and all that, and he's just shaking his
Please
head.
look
Oh, my
towards
God.
the mayor, please.
Shaking his head, and I'm shaking my head, saying, oh my God, this guy, it's going to take him at least a year, maybe more, to learn how to use that blower. What happens on our jobs, we have certain jobs, and the leaves have to go to a certain area. And even these people that don't know how to use blowers, they go like, ooh, 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 ooh. It even bothers me, you know? And then after a while, after they learn how to use a blower, it sounds real, half trigger, not full blast, not like some guy going down the street, or like they say, we're all using the blowers half trigger. And you have to blow those leaves. You have to learn how to blow. You have to learn how to blow leaves. And you can't at full trigger. You can't drive a car at full speed. You
Yeah,
gotta
thank you.
at normal speeds.
Thank you. That was your 3 minutes. Thank you.
I feel like I'm on a game show. Hi, my name's Sarah Ford. I live at 380 East Napa Street. And I think the council has an amazing opportunity tonight to really take a bold step. And I think its time has come to get rid of leaf blowers once and for all. By the way, I want to say I would never support this ban if I thought anyone would lose their job. Everything that I've read, am I in the right spot?
Huh?
Everything I've read and researched, everything I've heard has convinced me that people that the job loss would not exist. Oops. My husband and I lived in Del Mar for many years, a city that has a complete ban on all leaf blowers. It was a beautiful, leafy, peaceful, quiet community. Home values were strong, it had a robust economy, and a thriving tourist industry. My husband recently called Del Mar Public Works to inquire about compliance and enforcement, they had absolutely no problem with that, and they had no job loss. I repeat, there was no job loss. They use no leaf blowers even in the city properties. They sometimes rely on a street sweeper for large projects. I think we're going to look back on this era and wonder why we put up with these machines for so long. Wondering a little bit of, I feel like I'm hearing my echo and then not hearing it.
I think that the sound technician is working on it. That's why he
Okay, should I be right here or closer or? Okay, do I get a couple extra seconds?
4 seconds.
I feel like we're in this era and wonder, I'll just talk loud, why we put up with these noxious machines for as long as we did. Just to get a pristine lawn that might last for a day or even just an hour, when there are many other tools that were non-polluting that would work just as well. Said another way, why did we choose a short-term benefit over the long-term respiratory health of our children and other citizens? Whenever we learn that a product or a practice is harmful or toxic, generally public policy changes after that. When we found out about secondhand smoke, you weren't allowed to smoke on a plane anymore and lots of other places. When we found out there was lead, that lead was a neurotoxin, it got taken out of gasoline, toys, and paint. I don't see that as government overreach. Do you? I really don't. Likewise, we now have more information than we've ever had, even in the last year, about the harmful health and environmental effects of leaf blowers, especially for the operators, I might say. You've now heard from a lot of people through letters and tonight about not being able to work from home, kids that have to go in from the backyard when the neighbors' gardeners come, families that can't enjoy a picnic in the backyard. I think one person's rights end where another person's rights begin. I want to say one last thing, which is we asked to have a blower outside the room tonight, and we're told no because it would be too disruptive. And I really couldn't agree more.
No comments from the public, please.
What?
Oh, I was talking to the public.
Do I have a little more time? Because
You get about 15 seconds.
That was my closing comment. Anyway, I wanted to just make sure everyone knows about the buyback program. There's a state-sponsored program for buying back lawn equipment, including leaf blowers. You get your full value back, and that should be some consolation if there is a ban, which I certainly hope there is. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize for the volume. Can everybody hear the speaker in the back? Okay.
Okay, I need a taller mic. My name is Caroline Wampole. Do you want me to spell that? Wampole, and I live at 366 Patton Street in Sonoma. And for the record, I'm not a millionaire. I'm also a business owner, and I'm pro-business and pro-environment and pro-health. And I want to respond very quickly to someone who remarked that, we're going to we shouldn't have bans. Well, the city council just banned the sale of vapor cigarettes in retail shops in Sonoma, so obviously we do know how to ban things. And number two, in terms of children and dogs, noise, the last I heard, the American Lung Association and the Mount Sinai pediatricians did not all sign letters saying that children and dogs were harmful to people's health, whereas they did for leaf blowers. So in addition to being an artist and self-employed person, I'm also a songwriter and a writer. So I'm bringing in something a little different called One Day in Sonoma. One day in Sonoma, while busy at work, I heard such a noise I went almost berserk. 'Twas the sound of high frequencies piercing the fog, shaking the windows and scaring the dog. Should I run for cover, I thought with a frown, flashing to wartime men being shot down. But no, this was no cause for army fatigues. It was simply a leaf blower blowing some leaves. But what a contraption, and what's all that dust? And meanwhile, old Rake is out there gathering rust. I asked myself, surely you don't need such power, blowing leaves at 180 miles an hour? Rakes are cheaper and quieter, easy to use, and unless you're creative, hard to abuse. Ah, but look at the details the devil is in. Count up the cash these leaf blowers bring in, and the stories about them we've been made to believe, about how without them we'd be swimming in leaves. Leaf blowers are powerful tools. They bring order to gardens, parks, and schools. And for speed and efficiency, they leave rakes in the dust. But what cost do you ask? And indeed ask you must. So I got up from my desk on that day and I learned things about blowers that blew me away, because despite all their claims, these are not harmless toys, and the harm that they do is way bigger than noise. I learned about pollen and particulate matter and how soundscapes are ruined and habitats shattered, and leaf blowers make sick the old and the young while coating their homes in a thick veil of dung, and how in a drought they dry up the ground and parch thirsty animals while blowing Roundup around. And all this because such an outlandish tool slipped under the radar of EPA rule. So now we are stuck in this unpleasant space of having to choose between a rake and a scarred place. But the good news is that there are so many solutions. Look at other cities and towns who've passed resolutions. And thinking ahead to our own climate plan, isn't it time we stepped up to a ban? No, we can't reduce all greenhouse gases, but our air will be cleaner if a ban like this passes. And so I appeal to the depths of your brilliance to make Slow Sonoma a town of resilience. I know you are leaders, loyal, wise, and true, and I know you will choose the right thing to do.
Thank you. Lisa?
Lisa Summers, 250 Newcomb Street, Sonoma, city limits. I also live in the Friar Creek hive of leaf blowers. I would like to comment on somebody's comment earlier about the trailer park, that a lot of these landscaping services come for second homes. And so those of us who live here full-time, raise children, I've raised 4 children, pay the price. I'd also like to say that I'm an organic gardener and I'm no stranger to hard labor. I worked driving a forklift in sub-zero temperatures in Wyoming for many years. I get it. I know it's hard work, but there are alternatives. So I'd first like to thank you for revisiting this issue, and I've been before the City Council to speak about this issue as many times as you have heard it. And I would like to emphasize tonight that if the Council decides not to ban leaf blowers, this issue is never going away. And you will continue to be drawn away from other pressing matters until some acceptable resolution is reached. As you can see from the 800 signatures that we gathered, and we've been to talk to all of you and talk to members of the public, and the sentiment is growing. The problem only got worse after the 2013 epiphany of the decision to pass a ban. More scientific studies and findings about the many health hazards of blowers, including particulate matter emissions, desiccation of the soil, and the much downplayed ill effects of exposure to industrial level noise, have now reached the general public. But I'm not here to read you the science, because that has been provided to you in depth and volumes over the last few months. So why is this issue before you again? Why does it never go away? First, the lack of enforcement in the city renders the existing noise ordinance as it pertains to landscaping equipment totally meaningless. Nobody reports complaints to police because there is an understanding that these violations will not be enforced. After all, city maintenance staff violates their own noise ordinances. I used my decibel reader at the park the other day when they were blowing the stage. The leaf blower best practices guidelines seem to be a completely ever-changing document. Each time I go into City Hall to collect the latest version, significant changes have been made, ordinances dropped, and even basic courtesy and public safety guidelines, such as not blowing debris into the street or your neighbor's yard, appear and disappear at random intervals. In addition, all gas-powered leaf blowers which operate at high throttle currently violate the existing noise ordinance of 65 decibels. I would like to take a moment to talk about the loss of jobs, because I know that's a concern, and I'm glad it's a concern. And I hope that concern about loss of jobs will later translate to a living wage. In all other cities with leaf blower bans, no loss of jobs were reported. Nobody is asking for a ban on landscaping. We are asking for a change of tools. The drought has already resulted in mandatory restrictions on water usage in residential, commercial, and municipal landscaping. Lawns are drying out, and people are installing drought-friendly yards and gardens, which will require less maintenance, or at least different maintenance. We hear that a leaf blower ban will put people out of work by generating more work. Well, which is it? And the cost will be passed on to homeowners, as it rightly should, who are already receiving a highly subsidized rate of service by blowing pollution into the public space. A leaf blower ban will render landscaping services a private affair, just like cleaning or plumbing or any other routine repair and maintenance services, rather than a public nuisance that drives neighbors from their home. It is time to reconcile ourselves with the world we now live in, to make those tough yet necessary decisions that will move us forward into a quieter, greener, more peaceful Sonoma. I don't foresee a day when residents will sit in their backyards with a glass of wine, reminiscing about the days when the mornings and evenings were full of the sound of leaf blowers. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I get a show of hands of how many people are going to speak? Okay.
So I'm going to do my best. I don't do well speaking in public. But I have to just speak for myself. I'm not with a group. I'm Kathy Gergich. I live in the Boys Hot Springs. I have a dog walking pet care company here in Sonoma. I'm out on the streets daily, walking all over. And I come across many, many, many leaf blowers. And some are courteous, and they'll see me, and they'll direct it down to the ground and slow it down. Others are oblivious and look at me like, so what? And just blow clouds around me. Sometimes I've stopped with the dogs, waiting for somebody to see me and shouting, hello, hello, stop, see me please. And they can't hear me over the noise. So I wait for the cloud, and I go around, but I'm very allergic, and those small particles actually make me sick. And I feel it immediately. Within minutes, I feel it, the constriction. And so for me, I know I'm not alone in this, but I can only speak for what happens to me. And I just wish that there was a way to go back a bit. You know, what's wrong with rakes and picking it up. Some of these landscapers have masks on when they're blowing, but I don't have that option when I'm crossing their path. And I don't know what else to say except that I'm highly allergic, and I know there are many like me. And I wish you consider not being able to blow all over the place. I don't know where it goes. When I see them, nobody's there to catch it. There's no way that they're trying to catch it. It's just blowing into big clouds. So there's got to be a better way. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's continue public comment. If I could have some people stand in the back to wait in line so we can.
Tamara Unger, 215 East Napa Street. Good evening. I'd like to address living close to the plaza where I do and the great distress I experience working out of my home. My husband and I moved here in 1993, and we were so pleased to be able to find a home in a friendly neighborhood where we could walk with our dog, walk around town, and work out of our home since we're both working artists. We find that it is quite difficult now. It has changed immensely. It's just not a friendly place to be sitting outdoors, and we are surrounded sometimes 7 days a week with this distressing noise of leaf blowers. I just want to say that it's not conducive to being an artist, where you need to have the peace of mind and be in a state of creativity. Keep those channels open. Leaf blowers don't do that. And peace and quiet seem to be in a short supply around our home these days. Every neighbor around us, that includes 6 houses immediately around us, employ gardeners who use leaf blowers, and one neighbor does it themselves. There are neighbors who do it themselves when it's convenient to them and disregard the hours, and that is unfortunate for us. There are leaf blowers that, as been said, have been considerate, but they are doing their job. Sometimes we find that a certain day a week, right now it's Thursdays. I'd just like to walk you through a Thursday from our house. We have a Century mansion near our home. Actually, it's not that near. If you relevant to this discussion, it's behind us and across the creek and across the street, and they start Thursdays from 10 until 12. I can count on hearing that leaf blower going on and off and on and off. I have actually stood in my backyard, and the decibel level is quite loud, and then I've walked around the block and stood outside the gate and watched the leaf blower doing his work. And it's futile to be blowing a few leaves around just to keep the work going, it seems to me. And I have watched a beautiful, pristine lawn sitting there while a leaf blower working with his tool starts to just create more leaves by blowing into a flower bed and disturbing more dust. As a nature guide with Terwilliger Nature Guide with Wild Care for 26 years, I'm well aware of how mankind has unfortunately altered habits and destroyed habitats that can't be restored. And I would like to say that our quality of life is so disturbed by these leaf blowers, and I would like to know that we can be the good stewards of our land that we should be. We should be setting good roles for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, council members, Mayor Cook, and everyone in the audience. My name is Cecilia Ponison. Should I spell that for you? Ponicissan. I live at 175 France here in Sonoma. When we first moved to Sonoma, I would sit on the back porch steps and I could watch 20 to 30 monarch butterflies drift through the air toward the direction of the plaza. With each passing year, I saw fewer and fewer of these beautiful pollinators. Last year, I saw only 2 monarchs. Since that time, I've removed my front lawn and I planted 2 squares, 4 by 4 foot, of bee and butterfly-friendly flowers. And they're drought tolerant, as required by the city. I'm happy to say the milkweed has attracted several monarchs. It's a fact that if there's no milkweed, there will be no monarchs. Each week, my neighborhood is assaulted by an army of gas-powered leaf blowers. I watch them blow. They blow the bees off of the roses, the jasmine, and the fruit blossoms on my neighbors' yards, and the fumes foul the air. Those gas fumes are so strong, they continually drive away the birds, the bees, and whatever random butterfly might have been resting on a flower. The struggle of the pollinators is so dire that the White House has formed a task force and issued a plan to try and save them. Why? Because bees are responsible for pollinating 1 in every 3 bites of food we eat. I want to repeat that. Bees are responsible for pollinating 1 in every 3 bites of food that we eat. So, what are we doing in the city of Sonoma to protect the pollinators? Well, day after day and week after week, the city allows the topsoil to be blown away. This removes vital compost and creates hardpan, while fouling the air with gas fumes and toxic particulates. Now, the bees and the butterflies can't be here tonight, and they cannot sign a petition, but they need your help. Adopt a plan for green gardening and bring back the pollinators. Step 1, eliminate the blowers. I intended that to be my last comment, and if I have any time left, I don't know if I do. I don't. All right, then I have some papers to give to the clerk. It's the White House plan to save the honeybees, more information about honeybees, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Federal Department of Fish and Wildlife, is going to be doing a program also to try and help save the pollinators. It really is up to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Thomas Kennard, lifelong resident of the city and the Valley of Sonoma. The leaf blower issue here. It's a very useful tool. Its history goes back to somewhere just post-Second World War. I used to own one. It was a relatively cumbersome tool, but it was a good, useful tool. They've come a long ways. They're a lot quieter, they're cleaner, they're handy. They don't have cords attached, which, by the way, all of you talk about electric leaf blowers. You know how dangerous that cord is? You want to get on a roof and blow your roof off with an electric cord there? Talk about creating some hazards here, folks. Then we talk about the dust issue. Every time a car drives by your house, you create a cloud of dust. Rubber dust, none of us want to talk about the rubber dust in the air. That's the worst dust we have, by the way. Every time an emergency vehicle goes by at a high rate of speed, we have a huge cloud of dust created. Every time you turn on your vacuum cleaner, unless you have a really good small portable vacuum cleaner, you create a huge cloud of dust. We have houses with built-in vacuum cleaners that exhaust out the roof. They're over by where I live. There's a constant spew. In fact, when it's a moist morning and you see those on, you can see the cloud of dust coming out of these places. We are inundated with dust and noise virtually 100% of the time here. This used to be a quiet town before a bunch of people lived here. I know, I was here, but we still had lawnmowers. We still had a variety of tools. We had lots of steel rakes running, making lots of noise. By the way, have you ever taken a steel rake to asphalt or concrete and checked the decibels? I think maybe you should. Would be a very good thing for all of you to do and learn how much noise that thing actually makes. Every tool is misused. There's always going to be somebody misuse a tool, whether it's their blender, their automobile. I mean, go down to the plaza, you can see misuse of that all the time. So are we willing to ban everything in our lives because a few people want to complain about it? We really need to think about that. It's an extremely useful tool. It's been around for years. We're already banned on Sundays. I work all week. I got to go home and work on weekends. I'm banned from working on weekends. I get to go do it on Saturday if I can. So why don't we just live with the ban we have? Because all of us that have moved here, all of you that have moved here, have all created an environmental impact on all of the rest of us, whether it's air pollution or noise pollution or water pollution, runoff from your yards, people that use chemicals. We've all created an impact in many, many ways. So think about what you really want to do here. And be educated about it. Go figure out how much noise is really out there, because it's an awful lot. Every city is in a constant roar in this state every day.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
My name is Pat Coleman. I live at 827 Broadway in the city. I'm here to ask the city council to vote for a complete ban, and I'll tell you why. Number one, enforcement issues. You're right. You can't, there's so little enforcement in the small amount of regulation that you have that it is very difficult. So I recommend that you vote for a complete ban. Secondly, it's safety. You're right. These electric mowers, they're not safe. I urge you to vote for a complete ban. The other thing is the drought that is taking over our landscaping. The mow, blow, and go that was so exciting several years ago. Who's going to blow wood chips? It's not. Times have changed. We don't need gas or electric wind blowers for the new landscape that we have. And so I urge you to vote for a complete ban. The second thing is quality of life. I did some informal inquiries at the hotels here. Do you use a leaf blower? The MacArthur Place, the person said to me, "Oh no, we take our guests' quality of life seriously here." She was shocked at my question, actually. When I talked to the people at the lodge, the person responded to me, they use it sometimes in the winter, but he also said that the number one detraction that they get from their customers is the noise. So I urge you to vote for complete ban. And lastly, To have a place where we have butterflies, to have a place where we have children and older adults, to have healthier lives, to have a place where people can walk down and not get dust blown, or to have dogs become afraid, as our dogs do when those blowers are really loud, would be a much higher quality of my personal life and a lot of people's life here in Sonoma. And so I urge you to take courage and vote for a complete ban. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Zukowski. I live at 826 Austin Avenue, and I'm a relatively new resident of Sonoma, having moved from the rural area of Sonoma County, where we had a leaf blower for large-scale cleanup of the gravel road, and we successfully operated the Toro leaf vacuum, which worked fine and also allowed the debris to go into our compost. I wondered about this issue in Sonoma that I read about in the Press Democrat. What is going on with leaf blowers in Sonoma? There must be tons of them. Well, now that I moved to town, I understand. I see now that the prevalence of leaf blowers in this wonderful community with such a great quality of life is becoming a detriment and threat to that quality and a cumulative impact. This one tool in the arsenal of landscape maintenance is the problem, causing frequent exposure to harmful particulates and exhaust for neighbors, workers, and people passing by, indoor air pollution from dispersed exhaust, pollen, mold spores, and dust through open windows, exposure on a regular basis to disruptive noise in close proximity to dwellings, a real health hazard, and financial impact on city services to increase street cleaning requirements. Unfortunately, limitations on days and times cannot be enforced and do not address the primary impact of exposure, not only to residents, but to workers themselves and visitors to the community. It is very understandable that landscapers would be concerned about an ordinance banning leaf blowers. Change is frightening and sometimes entails cost, but this is a health and safety issue. Gas-powered leaf blowers are not essential to maintaining residential areas, as has been demonstrated by other cities that have restricted their use. Independent landscapers continue to be employed in cities that have prohibited their use in response to public concern. Any costs that are incurred by switching to cleaner, safer equipment should not be borne by landscapers themselves. If people can afford to contract for landscaping services, they can surely afford to pay slightly higher rates for safer and healthy techniques. So I support fully an ordinance prohibiting the use of non-vacuum, gas-powered leaf blowers adopted in the city of Sonoma to protect the health, safety, and welfare of residents, workers, and visitors. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maisonave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Paul Masonave, M-A-Y-S-O-N-A-V-E. I'm a resident of Moon Valley Mobile Home Community. And every morning at 5 minutes to 8, which is not within the regulations, I understand, the leaf blower goes off. Last week it was at 20 to 8 one morning. And, you know, somebody commented earlier, and I hadn't thought about it in reference to my own piece of property, but I don't have bees and I don't have butterflies, and the bird population has just been diminished. Now, I know it's a lot to do with the drought, but every morning, and then on Monday mornings, it's unbelievable because they're all over. So it's a very, I thought it was all about noise when I first got involved with these people that are on the committee. And really, it's about health and quality of life. The noise has to do with quality of life, but the health. I have a little bit of asthma now that I didn't have for years ago, but the dust and the stuff that's in the air is really definitely harmful to our lifestyle. I've been in the town since 1982, and it definitely has changed, as was said before. But what's really changed is the noise level. I mean, I guess all these new people bring all this noise, but with wealthier families, they can afford to have their yards taken care of. Many of us cannot. And I got my first job ever was I had a little lawn business, and I pushed my lawnmower around, my rake and my edger and clippers, and I mowed lawns. That's how I bought my first car. And I understand the plight of these people. They're concerned they're going to lose their jobs, they're going to cost them money, but really that's never happened. And I think that we have to look at the different bans we've already had. I mean, recently we had to stop using plastic bags. What did we do? We started using cloth bags. We had to quit smoking in restaurants and airplanes and in businesses and in different places. And I commend the city for what they're starting to do on the smoking ban. So we've made changes, and this is just time to make this change. I wrote a letter to the editor recently, and I made reference to the Peter Principle, which is what was introduced to me in college. And it's when a person is promoted to their level of incompetence. Well, I think that leaf blowers have gotten there. They're doing more harm than they are doing good. So I implore you to really seriously consider this and to put a ban on all leaf blowers. We're not talking electric. We don't want electric, and then they create the same problems. They may not be as noisy, but all the pollution is still in the air. So thank you very much, and I hope you vote in our favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. My name is Bill Boteef, and I live in the 200 block of MacArthur Street, West MacArthur Street. And a neighbor to my right and my neighbor to the left, both of them have gardeners that come out there and do their gardening on Thursday or Friday and blow their blowers and so forth. And I want to tell you, it doesn't bother me at all. I don't have a problem with it. They come out there at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they do what they're doing, and it doesn't bother me at all. Because I live on MacArthur, though, I'm about 2 blocks from the hospital and about 3 blocks from the fire department. Now, what bothers me is the fire department going up and down MacArthur, waking me up in the middle of the night, and the police department running up and down, making all that noise with their sirens. Last night, I went to bed at 10 o'clock, I usually do, and the dogs were barking for at least an hour and a half before I could finally go to sleep. So we had to do something about the dogs. You know, let's get rid of the dogs because they keep me awake. The blowers don't keep me awake at all. Okay? Now, I was here in 2013 when this issue was before the previous council, and I have to say that although that council did the smart thing and just put the thing to rest because it's nonsense, I like this council better. And I did support some of the people on this council, and I like them. And I just don't know where we're going with these issues on the noise. The people here are from all over the place. They're all over from the county, from wherever they're coming from. Last time in 2013, we had people from San Francisco coming up here and threatening that council with putting it in the Chronicle, what you were going to do, or threatening to do. I do remember at that meeting in 2013, the question came up from one of the members of the council about what would be the cost to the city if you were to eliminate the blowers. And the question was put, I believe, to the city manager at that time, what that cost was going to be. And he, as I recall, he said the cost to the city, an additional cost, would be $10,000 a year. Now, to me, $10,000 is a lot of money. I pay taxes here just like everybody else. And so what I'm going to say is, hey, if you guys that live here in the city don't want blowers and you eliminate it, they should volunteer to give the city $10,000 a year to pay for the elimination of that. That'd be nice. I don't want to pay it. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Daryl?
Daryl Ponison, 175 France. To the gentleman who made reference to the history leaf blowers. Around about the 60s, the Japanese invented them as delivery systems for insecticide, and they worked really well for that. And the gentleman who was just here referred to the $10,000. It wasn't a yearly fee, as I recall. It was an initial fee to switch from gas to battery-operated blowers, and indeed somebody did volunteer to pick up the price for that. I would like to commend the landscapers tonight who spoke. They spoke their feelings, they spoke their fears. They weren't aggressive. Last time I was here, and we've been doing this for 5 years, people have been coming and pleading for relief from the worst air and noise pollution handheld device in existence. We've been pleading for relief, worried that maybe we wouldn't be believed, our complaints wouldn't be believed, so we came with evidence. And we came with lots of evidence, and you've got lots of evidence. I commend the people tonight who came and spoke their feelings. They didn't have any evidence, but I respect their feelings. Last time I was here, I had a guy follow me out the door yelling, "Go back where you came from, we don't want your kind around here." Now, so I see a great improvement. I commend, I know this is the first step, so by the time we get to the last step, I may have people like that screaming at me. But let's do this thing. It's been 5 years. Get rid of them. You're gonna look back and say we should have done it long ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council members, for bringing this important issue up for discussion again. My name's Connie Rhodes. I'm a 40-year resident of Sonoma, and I work in the landscape industry. I'm a landscape designer. I've studied horticulture. I've studied landscape maintenance. I'm really concerned about the overuse of leaf blowers and the health effects. I'm a long-term proponent of a ban on leaf blowers. Approximately 15 years ago, I chose to use all non-powered gardening tools in my garden due to concerns about air pollution, which I understand is an extreme measure to not use any power tools. However, I don't want to subject my neighbors to loud noise or distribute any unwanted material from my property onto theirs. Last week, my neighbor's gardener operated a leaf blower for the better part of 53 minutes. That was one of 3 leaf blowers between 9 and 12. And I'm not sure, since it's not October, what they were blowing for the 53 minutes. Mostly I think there's an obligation to blow dust off of sidewalks. I doubt they would appreciate me blasting heavy metal music full throttle at 8:45 in the morning. I believe there's an opportunity for quiet gardening companies to be successful. I think we have a golden opportunity for many of you landscapers to get signs on your cars and trucks saying quiet gardening, because there are over 650 people who have expressed that they hate them. So if only 10% of those people were to go to quiet gardeners, that would be a lot of people. That would be 65 clients right there. Having employed a quiet gardener myself for the last few years, I know there's an interest in the community for alternatives to having all maintenance done by motorized machinery. All of the arguments pro or con can be summed up in 2 words: convenience, health. I mean, we're talking about health of the air, ozone layer, planet, lung health of children. Everything's about health. Stress. On Councilman Edwards' Facebook page, he expressed a desire to take care of Sonoma from the ground up. And I realize you clearly were not referring to leaf blower usage. However, I think this is a wonderful metaphor and an inspiration for us all to do our part to create a healthy community. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jack?
Jack Wagner, Fano Lane. I have a little bit of anecdotal information, I guess, that's relevant to this. This was an issue that came up in the campaign last year. It was something I really didn't give much thought to until I started running, and then I was giving a lot of thought to it because it was coming up a lot. I met with people, I listened to a lot of people, I talked to my friends that were landscapers. Their initial reaction was, you're not going to take our leaf blowers away, but after talking about it a little bit, they're usually receptive to some sort of compromise. I also called the former mayor of Santa Monica because that is an associate of mine, and he was there when they banned leaf blowers, and I asked him all the same stuff, and it's the same thing that the speaker earlier brought up about Belvedere, where no one lost their jobs. A lot of complaints, that was the thing. A lot of complaints coming in, too many complaints to deal with, but that's the ban working, I guess, you know. And, you know, I farmed and landscaped for about 2.5 years, so I do have some experience in landscaping. It's funny, I don't think I've ever used a leaf blower. I worked on a 200-acre property in South Carolina and a 400-acre property in Florida, and then a 10-acre residence and farm in Santa Rosa. And I did a lot of landscaping, kept places looking nice. There was event centers. This was glamping in Florida I was working on, so this was supposed to be all super, super posh. And, you know, when I was in Santa Rosa, I worked with this old school farmer, older guy, and he put me to shame, and he wanted every minute to count, and I used a rake on leaves and used a broom on cement. I just wouldn't ever. So it just seemed to me from having that experience. But I'm not to say like, you know, I didn't do these guys' jobs. I don't know their lives, but you know, it's not going to be the end of the world. And I think the people who've come up here and spoken have made some pretty good cases. So that's my take. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
Bob Edwards, 310 East Napa. I've sent all of you a copy of an email concerning the points and counterpoints on leaf blowers. I think you've heard them all here tonight. I won't repeat that email. As you know, I'm in favor of a complete and total ban. I think it's interesting tonight that you have not heard one good thing about leaf blowers. Think about it. Not one good thing. The thing you've heard from landscape contractors is basically it's going to take longer to do the job. We might have to charge more for some work. That's not a big deal. I've been using a rake and a shovel and a broom to take care of my property, which is about 1,600 square feet. It's got 2 huge oak trees and a huge sycamore tree that's all they do is shed debris. And I can give good news to all the landscape workers, some of whom I know quite well. You won't get laid off. I've been using that broom and shovel and rake, and I haven't gotten laid off yet. It's guaranteed work. And I think it actually, to put a ban in, will increase the employment opportunities in the city of Sonoma. I think that what we've heard here tonight are typical arguments. Let me just address a few. I won't bore you because I don't like to just simply repeat what everyone else has said. But you've heard the slippery slope argument. If we ban leaf blowers, what's next? Toothbrushes, lawn mowers? No, we're just talking about leaf blowers. The slippery slope argument, as we all know, quickly dissolves into silliness because landscapers now will take out a stump in your yard with a big grinder. They could do it cheaper and faster with dynamite, but I don't think anyone is suggesting that. But that's where you go with these slippery slope arguments. I think if you check the website of the California Landscape Contractors Association, you will see a lot about leaf blowers and how basically they want to keep them, of course. But one thing they do not say is it's going to cost anybody a job. In fact, it says that it will probably increase their work. And if you believe their numbers, it'll create 5 times as many jobs as we have now. Now, of course, you really, in good faith, I can't say you can believe those numbers because they weren't real data numbers. They were just, quote, surveys of our members. So I think the one thing we can conclude, as I said, nobody here likes leaf blowers. No one can say a good thing about them. Gas, electric, anything. There is no way they are not annoying. I think what council needs to focus on here tonight, my suggestion, is the quality of life for people who live in the city of Sonoma. Those are the folks that you're responsible for. I think the best practices guidelines for leaf blowers are quite frankly ludicrous. The best practice is turn them off. Many of our leaf blower operators are indeed courteous, but there is no way you can really be courteous with a leaf blower. Think about that. You just can't be courteous with a leaf blower. The arguments that, well, maybe we could just simply restrict the time of day when they can be operated. What time of day would that be? A question I would have is, what time of day do you want to annoy me? Okay? Because if you want to annoy me, I can annoy you back. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Good evening, council members. My name is Mark Janofsky. I'm a 20-plus year resident of Donner Avenue here in Sonoma, and I'm a registered environmental health specialist. Janofsky. I very much understand the concerns expressed by the landscapers here about the possibility of a ban on leaf blowers. Change is very, very frightening, and I can attest to that as well as anyone. However, the situation is sort of analogous to me as to when smoking was banned in restaurants in California. At that time, the restaurant operators and their lobbyists panicked and acted like the sky was falling. They said, "You're going to put us all out of business. Nobody's going to want to go to dinner anymore." It didn't happen. When smoking was subsequently banned in bars in California, the outcry was even louder. People like to smoke in bars. What are you doing? You're going to put us out of business. It didn't happen. Please, ban all leaf blowers. Do the right thing for the people of Sonoma, including your families. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back to council, and I have requests from up here to take a 5-minute break. Could I please get silence? Before our recess, we had finished with our public comment, and now we are to council discussion and possible action. Is there any council member that would like to?
I have a question of staff. Carol, can you give me a number? I see the chief left the building, of how many complaints have been, I think we started on this back in March. How many complaints and/or violations, tickets, XYZ from leaf blower issues?
Well, I don't have the most recent, and I could get that updated, but for the current year, but the most recent information we have is there were 157 noise-related complaints. 16 were attributable to leaf blowers, and of those 16, they contacted the parties and were advised of the regulations, but they did not issue citations.
Is there any other discussion? Councilmember Agramonte?
Maybe possibly a comment, which, shouldn't lead anyone to think which way I'm voting. I just wanted to ask or make a couple of statements. Let's see. Regardless of which way we go, I actually believe whether we are going to strengthen the guidelines or just ban leaf blowers altogether, I would like whatever decision we make, it involves a transition period so that the city can prepare for whatever track we take. Just how do they prepare to do this? One of my biggest issues, I think, is regarding enforcement, because I just don't know how. We don't enforce it now. I think we were discussing that there have been some infractions that have been recognized, but I think the biggest issue is enforcement for me. The other thing, I've have friends that live in Tiburon, and it's interesting. They told me they had guidelines as well. And in Tiburon, the property owners and the gardeners get citations, not just the gardeners, that property owners throughout the regulations are mentioned with contractors and other people who work on landscapes. So they are part of the infractions. The city of Burlingame, similar to what, our guidelines here, but what they do is they limit it to certain sections of the city on certain days. So those are just a couple of things. But my biggest concern, of course, we can pass anything today, but how are we going to enforce it? And I think I heard that an awful lot here. So I think that's really as important as whatever we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunley?
All right, so I'll dive into this a little bit. So it's interesting how this whole discussion has evolved, because it seems like 5 years ago it started focused mainly on the nuisance aspect of leaf blowers. Then it might have picked up a little bit of the emissions side. When I was in law school, the little town next to mine banned leaf blowers, and it was based solely on the emissions, because that was something that was happening a lot. And then recently, particularly all the people that I met with, it's focused a lot on the particulate matter in the air. So listening to what everyone has said, and I really appreciate everyone that's given thoughts. I tried to arrive today with, I've done a lot of reading about it, and I just try to come with an open mind just to see the different perspectives that everyone has, because everyone's coming at this from a slightly different perspective, and I think that the most are very reasonable, and I think that this is something that people can reasonably disagree about, and I think that's why there's some cities that allow them and some cities that haven't. So at the heart of this, it seems like it's quality of life versus quality of life. On the one hand, you have the freedom to maintain your property the way you want and the freedom to execute your business in the way that you want. And I know that there's a lot of people in Sonoma that think that's very important. But on the other hand, you have the living in a community that wants to take a tangible step towards lowering our emissions and improving our air quality, and living in a community that's committed to being more and more sustainable, which includes having sustainable landscaping, sustainable to water, and sustainable to maintain, and being able to enjoy as much peace and quiet as is reasonably possible. And with everything that have considered so far and that we might consider in the future of whether we're going to allow it or not, there's always a cost-benefit analysis. So there's been a lot of metaphors about like, oh, well, if you ban leaf blowers, then what about children? What about emergency vehicles? Which is true. I mean, those things can be very annoying, but when you do a cost-benefit analysis, a fire truck, very disruptive, but on the other hand, it's going to go save someone's house, someone's life. So we have a higher threshold for things that annoy us when they give a higher benefit. And so when I think about leaf blowers, it's hard for me to put a lot on the benefit side above things like, being able to have a well-manicured lawn and maybe getting the task done a little easier. So my pros and cons on both sides, and then I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks before we start talking about what direction we're going to go. On the side against having a ban, and a lot of the things that I read, there was a lot of articles given about the different health effects of particulate matters, and I actually did read all of them. And it's a lot to read, and there's a lot of science there about things in the air that are bad. But as far as when it's directly attributed to leaf blowers, I didn't find a really tight nexus. And I noticed a lot of other cities, with their ordinances, they have referenced the American Lung Association, like Los Angeles had that built into theirs, that they consulted them. So if we wanted to go this direction, I think that it would be beneficial to see if we could get at least some advice or guidance from an organization like that. I know at the last ban it was going to be just gas blowers, and perhaps at the time electric leaf blowers were not as loud, but I think as battery technology improves, as soon as Tesla comes out with an electric leaf blower, it's going to be even more powerful than a gas. So the distinction between that I don't really see. And also the attitude of just letting people live and let live, I think is very valid. And I can see why people don't want someone to intrude on the way that they maintain their properties. So on the plus side of having a ban, or perhaps much higher restrictions. I think a lot about the fact that we live in a town that has a higher than average population of seniors that spend a lot of time at home. We have a lot of people that work from home that moved here so they could, have their home businesses here. So it could be that in a neighborhood where a lot of people leave to go to work and then come back, they miss what's happening during the day. But here, if people are home more, then it's going to bother them more. The emissions concerns are huge for me, and I know some people are frustrated saying like, oh, well, this engine does the same as this, but you're not going to ban, a lawnmower. But again, when you get back to cost-benefit analysis, maybe one day there will be electric lawnmowers and we'll move in that direction. Whereas this is a problem now. One little thing we could do for emissions, a little tiny step we could take, and it might be worth making. I've already mentioned sustainable landscaping, and something I think a lot about the yards here, since we live in a Mediterranean landscape. I feel like there's been this English influence of having these perfectly manicured lawns, and it's like people have to fight the environment to have the lawn that they want. Whereas if you move towards embracing our climate, having plants that like to grow here, embracing our trees, then you can live with your environment rather than feeling you're having to fight against it. And a couple more things. One, I am encouraged by the fact that it seems like in the other towns where they were scared that there would be an economic impact, and I think that's definitely a huge consideration. People's jobs. I own a business. I recently, when my regular events, I had to switch from having my gas-powered generator to using electricity, and it was a huge pain. It took me 2 months to work out. It cost me a lot of money. So I get it, and I'm really sensitive to that. But what we see from other towns is that it hasn't been as disastrous as I thought it was going to be. And the last point I'll make is that, as Mr. Kennard pointed out, there's a lot more people living closer to now. So it used to be people could do things and didn't affect their neighbors as much, but now we're living closer together. And I think that either you can get rid of some of the people, which I'm not sure how you're going to do that because we live here, or we'll just have to figure out little ways that we can live together. And this could be one of the little ways to make our lives a little easier. So that's the thoughts that I have, and as far as where we go from that, I would love to hear what other people have to think.
Councilmember Edwards.
So I'll jump in now that the pool's been warmed up here a little bit. Going back to the minutes, I asked staff to give me the minutes from the last couple of meetings, and there's in the minutes of the 2013 meeting, it said that I was in support of banning leaf blowers. It was Bob Edwards. It wasn't Gary Edwards. And at that time, and I know Bob, you wrote a letter to the editor, which you might have read those minutes, but it was actually you and not me. Just to be that clear.
When the minute said it was you.
Well, they sometimes they get it wrong. So I want to jump into the issue of particulate matters. So. I'm very busy in my business, and I have lots of things to do, but I've taken a lot of interest in this particular thing because it's been kind of the focus of the City Council when I think of all the issues and things that are going on in the world, and I think of this leaf blower issue and particulate matter. So I've done some reading, quite a bit actually, and when we talk about particulate matters, that anytime that the McDonald's or anybody fries something and you smell it, you have particulate matters. Anytime you smell anything, it's particulate matters that you're taking in. And I was thinking today is when they spread the manure up at Merton's Dairy near Gloria Ferrari, you can smell the manure in Sonoma. And today the wind was blowing. You can check my figures, 21.5 miles an hour today. And leaves were blowing all over the place. The pines are dropping their needles right now. The heat is stressing quite a few of the different varieties out. I'm not an expert on trees, but I'm watching. I'm looking at everything. I've met with several of the folks that have spoken tonight. I've heard complaints about 6 hours of leaf blowers, and I've driven by many of the homes that are of the people's addresses listed, and many times during the day. And sorry, I'm using up a lot of fuel to do that, but I get 26 miles to the gallon in my van. And I'm not seeing 6 hours a day going on. And in this entire conversation, I haven't heard a single person, I brought this up in my meetings, about getting together with your neighbors when you have a problem. Nobody's brought that up. In my neighborhood, I'm very respectful of my neighbors. If a neighbor comes and says, I have an issue, I deal with it immediately. Or back when I got married 10 years ago, we had a party. We walked around to every single home, letting people know we were going to have a party till after 10 o'clock, that we were probably going to be there. And we brought everybody a bottle of champagne to get to know our neighbors, have my wife meet the neighbors as well. And so when we talk about bees and butterflies and children, I have all of those in my yard. And I do have my guy comes with a leaf blower. He spends at the most 15 minutes. And because when I come home, I work 70, 80, 90 hours a week. I'm not going to do the work. I don't want to do the work. I used to do it all the time. Took the front lawn out. We have olive trees. We have mostly rocks in the front yard, tomatoes that are ripe right now, corn that my kids are eating out of the yard. And I see the problem, but I also know quite a few doctors in town. And I have a little inhaler that I use from time to time because I've had asthma since I was a kid. And CVS, I think if they would give us their numbers, they would tell us about the hundreds of thousands of dollars that they sell in allergy medicines in Sonoma. This is with or without leaf blowers. The pollen, if you didn't have a single leaf blower in town, the pollen from the wind, the trees, it's everywhere. There are no scientists that I've heard in the room tonight. Dr. Kraus, I totally respect his work and the things that he's done in Yosemite and other places, noise pollution and that sort of thing. But, I think of when the wind blows, I hear the Harleys on Broadway, hear the Harleys at 2 a.m. And imagine if we tried to ban Harleys, imagine who would be in the room right now. I just don't think we start banning things, next thing you know, when people say it's a slippery slope, I agree with the slippery slope perspective. I believe in people's rights to be respectful to their neighbors, and if they're not, call somebody, form some sort of mediation. Nobody's calling. We've had 16 calls on leaf blowers. I mean, if I have an issue, I'm going to call the police. That's their job. And maybe that's the next tactic that the group's going to use, provided whatever direction this goes. But I'm very respectful. I helped start the first organic cheese factory in California, working with Albert Strauss. I've worked in Sonoma from the ground up in many, many ways. I see neighbors, I see the addresses, I see the people that they complain about, and I know better in a lot of cases. And I think a lot of the letters and comments have a very common thread, and I totally understand it. And as far as 600 people or 800 people signing a petition, number one, I'm not running for anything. So people, when they say, well, it's going to cost you votes, it's irrelevant to me. It's not about votes. It's about the quality of the human condition in Sonoma. And I think once you ban it, if this council decides to do that, then I think we're going to awaken a sleeping giant. And I think teaching people to be more respectful with the hours. I think if there's a complaint mechanism, call up. I've told people that I'm willing to go and talk to anybody, any one of your neighbors. You give me a call, I'll go knock on your neighbor's door. I'm not afraid to talk to anybody. So I think that the rules that we have, the hours that we have are reasonable. My brother lives in Germany. You don't dare light up anything on a Sunday. I would be open to pushing the hours on Saturday. There's a CEO of a company that lives 3 doors down, and there are guys there every Saturday, and I wish he maybe wasn't, but it's the guy's there for 15, 20 minutes, and it goes away. But as far as, when my neighbors, when they have something going on, I'm completely respectful. I don't go build things in my backyard. I just don't make noise. And my 4 and 6-year-old are on the trampoline every day, and they can yell their lungs out. And the first person that complains, watch out.
Vice Mayor Gallion.
Well, I'm on record in both 2011, 2013, and March of this year for my position and why I wanted to bring it back. I felt that the ordinance in 2013 would probably be good enough. I thought that, we had gotten what we were going for. We were talking about electric leaf blowers and, keeping them together. But I have been thoroughly convinced with the many meetings that I have had with the different groups, and I'd like to just say that they are a neighborhood here that is being represented, because they are neighborhood representatives coming from different parts of the city that have come together to be their neighborhood representing their positions. And they are they've come from their normal days and their lives and their jobs and their home issues, and they have actually stepped up. They've stepped out and stepped up to speak to us tonight. This is not an ordinary movement. This is something people who believe that they need to go ahead and have a voice, need to be heard, and they want their city council to actually hear this issue. So I don't look at this as an exercise. I look at this as a call and a cry from the public that this is something that they want us to pay attention to. If you look at the bottom of our staff announcement, you'll see at the bottom of each agenda item there's something that ties with our goal. We have a goal here that says policy and leadership. Provide continuing leadership as elected officials and residents of the community. This is a leadership role that our constituents are asking us to rise up to. Convincing for me is the issue of how many lives and quality of life has been impacted by this one unit, this one exercise, this one area. It involves noise, it involves environment, it involves community, people who are living together, who are trying to work. This is not the type of thing that you want to go ahead and do nothing about. I feel that we need to be taking very much to heart what has been represented tonight, and we need to be reviewing the facts as they come forward. There's economic costs. I am very sensitive to businesses. I work, in a school. I know that many people who are involved in businesses here in the city work in different jobs throughout, our area. This affects everyone. This is an issue that affects everyone. It needs to be taken with a very serious nature. And if after the issues that are being asked are looked into and addressed, and you feel that this is not, as a council member, something that you want to pursue further, then fine. But I feel we have commentary at this point. We still have staff to do their work. I would wish staff to do their work, and I would like to see something come back in the form of an ordinance that we would then go ahead and work around. I feel it's important. There's the limitation hours. Well, if there's a ban, there's no limitation on hours. I feel if we're talking about lower decibels, if there's a ban, there's no decibels to be considered. If we're talking about commercial and mixed use, residential, another issue. All right? Are we addressing all? Prohibition of just gas leaf blowers as it stands right now, would that include electric leaf blowers as well? Regulations about the dust debris, the street components, how the debris is going back and forth. If there's a ban, there's none of that has to be considered. There's a lot here that needs to go ahead and be addressed. And I do believe, after I've heard all this commentary, and I've read all my emails, that at least, and I apologize if I have not responded, but I have read for weeks now emails. I just want to say that there's a lot that I need to digest. I'm not here tonight to, vote on it one way or the other for an ordinance to go into effect. I want time and I want staff to give this due diligence. And I feel it's deserving of that issue. And if I had to count the number of times I heard quality of life tonight, that to me, as a public servant, elected by you, puts me on the radar that says your quality of life is being affected. And that's important to me.
Well, we're all taking turns. So I was on the council before when this vote came to the council. And it's kind of interesting because I've talked to a lot of past city council members, some that were my colleagues at the time, some who weren't. And it was kind of interesting listening to their comments after they got off the dais and really looked at the issue. We all pretty much could agree that the leaf blower issue is an issue. Doesn't matter if you're for it or against it, it's an issue. And it's a Sonoma issue. I've talked to some of my colleagues on other councils in other Sonoma County areas, and surprisingly enough, leaf blowers aren't an issue in most of them. Some of them they are, some of them they aren't. And I did like city staff giving us a little bit of what's going on in Sonoma County with the other cities and what's going across the U.S. When I sat on the council before and we made the discussion, this is a big moving target. And where it first started was, does it affect residential, commercial, and public works? And that's what we were trying to figure out. You know, if we're going to be restrictive or we're going to have a ban, how do we do that? And who does it affect? Og Sebastiani, when it came a long time ago, I even said this when it came before, was talking about being neighborly. And he said, you know, we live in Sonoma. Knock on your neighbor's door. Some people don't feel comfortable knocking on their neighbor's door in Sonoma anymore. And that's part of probably the change of Sonoma and probably all across the U.S. That's not a Sonoma issue. That's just people are more private, and people don't want to have to go over and talk to their neighbor. Enforcement was my big issue why I did not vote for the ban. Because I said that night, I was not going to vote for something that we can't enforce. Because it happens. It takes money to enforce. We have budget hearings, nobody shows up. We have a dog issue, everybody shows up. We have a leaf blower issue, everybody shows up. And I mean, I understand that. But if this council decides that we want to be restrictive or we want to do a ban, it's going to cost money. So the first thing that I would like to say, that I would like residential, commercial, and public works to all be treated the same. Number two, I think that we possibly will go restrictive, and there has to be a permit. And the permit would be for the commercial. And that money would be used to enforce. And the main reason I'd like to see that is one of the speakers, it's true. There are a lot of businesses that don't have business licenses that are operating as businesses in Sonoma. And that's not fair to the other businesses. So I always like to say that I'm a business-friendly person because I do own a company and I do understand it costs money. If the council is going to do it this time, I want the council to do it right. I sat in the nosebleed seats down there when it came up the first time. I was up sitting right over, I think I was sitting over there when it came up the last time. It was heading in kind of a good restrictive position that I think everybody would have been happy that it was heading towards the right, progressive. But that night, just because of a vote change, everything just got thrown out. And even myself, I would like to see restrictive. So what I would like to see is I would like to see the hours go down. I'm not going to say what I think the hours should be because I would like to get a little bit more information from my colleagues. I do know that school gets out at 3 o'clock. I do know that we have asthma problems in Sonoma. Councilmember Edwards is correct by saying that Sonoma, we do have a pollen issue. Take all the leaf blowers away, we're still going to have people with asthma. But the misuse of leaf blowers is true in Sonoma because someone who don't like bans, can't stand leaf blowers when they're blowing from street to street And I wouldn't mind leaf blowers if the operators were using them right. One of the landscapers mentioned, and it is true, if you go half throttle, it's okay. It's not as bad as full throttle, where those decimals get up. If the council decides to do nothing, I would be afraid that there would be people in Sonoma that would be very upset and feel that their elected officials aren't doing their job. If we go restrictive, I want it enforced. And I want to see these landscapers have business licenses. I want them, like our current ordinance states, it has to have their name and their number. And I would also like to see a number of who to call. Who do you complain to? You know, I don't want people calling 911 because there's a leaf blower blowing, but I would like them to be able to make that call. And even though I do understand that the business license won't totally take the whole, won't be enough revenue to cover that, but it would be a start. So I was prepared tonight to actually make a vote if my colleagues would like to. And what I would like to see is I'd like to see a restriction, Monday through Saturday, talk about the hours, because there are people that need to use their leaf blowers. Personal residences would not have to get a business license. I'm only talking about commercial. But even them, they would have to have restricted hours, and I'd like to see all those hours be the same. Because one thing we do sometimes is we make things so difficult that nobody even knows what the ordinance is. So if you just want to ban leaf blowers from all times except for the hours of 10 to 2, then that's what we would have to do. Or if my colleagues would like to see a ban, I don't think that I'm prepared to ban leaf blowers 100% in Sonoma. I don't think that would be, I don't think that's a direction that we need to go right now. But if we do become restrictive and the problem still exists, then the council would have to end up acting in the future. And I think this is the final wake-up call, even for myself, sitting as an elected official of Sonoma, that there is a leaf blower problem in Sonoma, and this council is the one that's going to have to take care of it. 2 years ago, I wanted to be a ballot measure. Would have cost $3,500. I would have loved to seen the signatures that got against leaf blowers, if they would have went so they could have put it towards the ballot. And I think the city spending $3,500 for an election during the election year would have made a lot of sense. But I've heard from many people that they want their elected officials to make this decision. So I kind of turn to my colleagues, and I would like to talk about how they feel about restricting the ordinance further. Councilmember Agramonte.
Thank you. One thing I suggested today, I spoke with our city manager with respect to licenses, and I thought perhaps the Chamber of Commerce could get involved to put a packet together for these businesses and to ensure that they would have that full packet of identification on their trucks, on, with possibly a packet with business cards, as well as the business license. That was one of the things I guess I suggested. I was really, I think that whatever we do needs to include the infraction that includes the property owner. Because if the property owner is not going to let their landscapers know what the guidelines are, and we have to adhere to them, I think it's irresponsible. And I just wanted to add one thing. I'm married to a gardener, a retired gardener landscaper. And I understand why people use the leaf blowers, because I work in my yard with my husband, and he tells me when I rake, you're raking up too much dirt. Too much dirt goes in the garbage. The garbage cans are too heavy. So I know what he's talking about with that, and there are just different ways that you have to do that. And I know that the leaf blowers are very convenient, but you know what? I think that's what I would like to be added to this, is the property owner is as responsible as the gardener, and that possibly we could consider the chamber putting together a packet. And I think it's up to the council, of course, but I think City of Tiburon has the property owner as part of that, and then possibly even looking at sections of the city to be able to do gardening at, for them to work at certain times. I'm not real adamant about that. But the other thing I think I ask this council is to provide some type of a transition period, because no matter what we do, we have to do this the right way. I think that's what I've heard from everyone. And what does that mean? One of the CSOs would do that? I don't know. Could it be in somebody from each departments have this kind of, the restrictions to be able to look at these things? We mentioned about neighbors, they can speak to each other. I will not make this personal, but I do not speak to my neighbor because, and I wish we had conflict resolution in this city, and that's what I've pushed for, and I think it's a really valuable program for us. But so those are just my comments, and I really believe that we need to be very serious about this enforcement.
Thank you. Councilmember Hunley?
Yeah. So after hearing sort of where everyone is, I just wanted to put out there that I am leaning more towards on the side of having a complete ban, but my one concern has to do with our own public works. I know that our maintenance staff is very small. I believe it's 3 people that have to take care of 11 parks. And before I thought maybe it was just a concern about, keeping up the aesthetic of the plaza so that it looks nice, but it's also been pointed out to me, it was in the staff report, that it's also a safety concern. If there's a lot of wind and suddenly there's sticks all over the sidewalk and somebody slips on those sticks, then suddenly the city has a huge liability. So when it comes to public works, I don't think that a complete ban would work, and then I'm not sure how people feel about something not applying to the city. So what I would like to see is a ban in residential areas, and for commercial and public works, severely restricted hours and perhaps restricted tools.
Councilmember Edwards?
So, Councilmember Hunley, so when you're talking about residences, so when the leaves are piled up on the sidewalks and somebody slips, whose responsibility is that? Is it the city's responsibility? Is it the property owner? Because the property owner, I believe, owns out to the street. So who accepts that liability?
Sure,
in other words,
well,
when the leaves fall in October, November, and then when it rains, because it will rain again, whose liability does that become?
Well, I'll tell you the huge difference. If the city property was the size of someone's yard, then I think that we could take care of it with rakes and brooms, but because our property is so huge and we have 3 people taking care of it, the other solution would be to hire more people to go out there by hand and do it. So that's the distinction I see between a property owner and their property.
Yeah, I
and
don't think you got my question, though. Is whose liability is it when somebody slips walking down the street?
Well, I mean, you first mentioned a pile of leaves on the sidewalk.
No,
so
In all fairness to Councilmember Hunley, if she doesn't feel like she needs to answer the question,
well, then don't answer the
that's fine.
question. It's okay. Yeah, I don't mind.
people, I mean, I know that businesses have to maintain the sidewalks in front of them, so.
Do they?
Yes, they do.
Really?
They do on at least state property, or the Caltrans.
I'm talking about reality. Not what the rules are. What people should be doing is cleaning the sidewalk. But what happens on the plaza when somebody slips on wet leaves? In other words, just walking down the sidewalk, walking down the street in front of the ice cream shop.
All right, so I'm not
and so on.
suggesting that the sidewalk shouldn't be maintained. I'm just talking about realistic ways. And I think that they should be, and I think in some circumstances, it's within the property owner's ability to do it without leaf blowers, and in some instances, perhaps with the city, and perhaps with certain businesses, that it would be better for them to let them have leaf blowers with restricted hours. That's what I'm suggesting.
Are you all done with any?
I think so.
Okay. Is there anything else over here?
I could keep going for hours.
Okay, Councilmember Edwards.
So we listen to a lot of people here that work out of their homes. So are they commercial or are they residential?
We could look at the zoning map and figure that out really fast. So
Well, we know what it is, but what's realistic now is people are starting to work out of their homes. So what's happening is it's becoming a commercial area. Also, the decibel level of a rake, which I own a few of them. I went out and did a test. I have this great little decibel thing, and everybody in this room was in violation of the noise ordinance. It was 78 decibels in here when people were just standing around talking. The leaf blowers, I have the list here from Still, that go 76, looks like the highest one, which I would hope our guys around town wouldn't have that, but the rake on the gravel last night was 98 decibels. I mean, I'm definitely doing my homework on this, and I actually work in the farming industry, and I actually work in agriculture. This is still an agricultural community.
Well,
And-
the good news is
yeah.
we all have a vote here, and what I want to get the council back on direction is where are we heading towards for direction with city staff as far as restrictions? And Vice Mayor Gallion.
Well, you've heard my position of how I feel. I also think that, one of my issues was in the business licenses. I had also talked to the city manager. She's probably chapter and verse in business licenses at this point. But I just wanted to say that, some of the things that were concerning from my reports and visiting with constituents is that that in order to go ahead, one of the problems with the citations, reporting, or even any violations is that it's 10 to 15 minutes. Even if you started at the start time, it doesn't mean that that 15-minute window is open to anybody responding to that particular complaint at that time. So, and the fact that, again, trucks are not signed, maybe even going over and asking for a business card or something of that nature might be relevant, but if nothing is provided, then it's like, oh, well, it happened at my house at this time, and there's no way that they feel that that's empowering. So I think if you were going to look at enforcement, I think you definitely need to study the business practice now for enforcement. So you have business licenses, you have enforcement, the citations response, what staff would you need in order to enforce this? What mitigation steps would be taken for those who actually, if you did pass, if the council passed, a non-ban on this, what mitigation steps are we taking into play in order to mitigate all of the environmental concerns, emissions, and other things that are here? What are we doing to do that? Job impacts, this is the hiring. Truly, it's a green job that you'd be hiring for, in that respect. But again, we have xeriscape ordinances that talk about our drought-tolerant plants to our water usage. This is not rocket science any longer. This is how we are building a community towards resiliency. So anything that you are thinking at this point, I really want to impress. Resiliency is what you're doing. We're not talking just drought tolerant. We're talking about being drought resilient. We're talking about air quality resiliency. We're talking about environmental resiliency. These are things that will play far into the future. If you were to consider a ban on this totally, 50% of this equation goes away. Those are my points.
So I have a question for city staff. It sounds like we're a little stagnated up here. This might be something that we might want to go into a matrix, possibly at a future council, maybe discuss tonight about where we want to go as far as, unless somebody makes a motion to ban leaf blowers in Sonoma, it sounds like we possibly would be going towards restrictive.
So I'll try, since we'll probably get tasked with drafting whatever it is that you all ultimately come up with or direct. I think that you have a couple of options here this evening. One would be to direct us to come back with I'll call them a matrix of options, which essentially we could put them all down in a list, and you could come up with a straw vote to give us direction as to how to ultimately draft the ordinance, or any ordinance if that comes, if it can get consensus on all of the terms and conditions. The other option is for us to sort of go through all of the things that you've discussed tonight and try to reach consensus on some of those items tonight and skip that step. I don't know what the council's tolerance level is to dealing with that this evening, or whether you'd like us to sort of look at both what we heard from you tonight, take a look at some of the other ordinances and look at items that are in those other ordinances as options, and bring forward some, I don't want to say pick and choose menu options, but close, for you to look at, ultimately derived from both your own comments this evening, as well as where other cities have gone with their ordinances. So those are my two thoughts about how we could go about dealing with this from here.
What I'd like to ask my colleagues on the council is what I would like to do is I'd like to go ahead and start going through this to save city staff a lot of time. That way we kind of have a straw poll. And then if there is something that we feel that we need to go back to a matrix, we can further discussion at another council meeting. Is that okay with my colleagues on the council? Okay. And do you want to go ahead and, Mrs. Giovanato?
Thank you. I just want to make one point of clarification, and that's with regards to business licenses and understanding the difference with business, because I've heard the conversation of business licenses and then potentially some kind of permit to operate. A business license is a tax. It's not regulatory. It's not a permit to operate. It is a business license tax. It is simply the license to do business within the city limits of Sonoma. It is a tax. So I need, I want you, as you go through this discussion, to understand that it is not regulatory. So if you are looking at any provision in your discussion, that it has no regulation feature to it. If you're looking at some level of operational permit, then that's a separate discussion that you would need to add into the ordinance. Don't rely on a business license as being regulatory.
So
every business does need a business license, and so that would be a secondary permit. But but a permit to operate is a separate
Councilmember
item.
Edwards?
Carol, can you tell us just in your professional estimation, how many businesses operate in Sonoma without a license?
I wish I could. I wish I knew. We continue, we continue to track. I mean, we have people at the farmers market looking for licenses. I mean, we continue to go. We have our sales tax consultant
the reason I
that
bring
we
that up
track.
is this past weekend with the half marathon, I saw these vans running around that said Chariot on the side, and never seen them before.
Yeah.
And I would bet they don't have a business license.
Exactly. And so, again, it's one of those things as we quote unquote catch, can catch them, or through our sales tax consultant, through the franchise tax board, when we find out that they have, had sales posted in the city of Sonoma, then we backtrack and do it that way.
And theoretically, every single Uber driver should have a business license in Sonoma, correct?
Yes. But that's, yes. But yes, if you are doing business, let me just put it this way, if you are making money in the city of Sonoma, generating money in the city of Sonoma, you're required to have a city business license. So, but I wanted to make that clarification as you move forward, so you understand.
So let's go ahead and start there. I said earlier that I'm in favor of a permit that you would have to get to operate leaf blowers in Sonoma. We can just kind of do a straw poll really quick, starting with Madeline Agamonte.
Mr. Mayor, if you wouldn't mind me asking the question of, are you speaking that everyone who would be a commercial operator of leaf blowers would need a permit, or every single person who uses one, including a single-family residence
Only commercial.
owner? Okay, thank you.
So,
Permit. I'm okay with that.
Hunley?
I find the permit slightly problematic because what are you going to do? Go up to someone with a leaf blower and ask them where to show their permit? Like, how are you going to be able to identify who's permitted and who isn't?
Well, I could answer that. Because on their truck, they're supposed to have their name and the number, and they would have their permit number there. So if the permit number wasn't there, you would know that they didn't have a permit. It would just be a way to regulate it.
All right. Yeah, I mean, if it was something that had to be affixed to the vehicle, that would make sense to me.
Vice Mayor Gallion?
I'll go ahead and try to make the best of the situation here. So if I was to look at permit, I think you're incurring another cost for the business owner by going ahead and having to have a permit number put on their vehicle. A lot of them have their names on the side of trucks and whatever. Some have magnetic signs. Magnetic signs would not have an issue with it because you could take it off and whatever. But I'm mixed on that. If you want to go ahead and get information concerning it, then I'm for education and I would hear about it.
Councilmember Edwards?
I would say no. I'm more for people working together and figuring out a way for everyone to do their business and stay in business.
Then, if you want me to, I guess the next one would be property owner plus the landscape would be the ones who would get the fine if there was a fine incurred. I don't know if we should go with the fine first, or if we can loop those together.
I think if you're just looking at who receives the violation, then I think your initial question is, would it be both the operator of the leaf blower and the property owner, or if those people are different individuals? They could be the same individual.
Yes.
But, yeah.
Hunley?
I'm sorry, and Carol, I'm sorry, I can't, was it Tiburon or? Tiburon says it in their information. Property owner and employee, contractor, or whatever. There are three things there.
Okay. Hunley? Would you be for or against?
I would possibly be for it if there was some sort of safeguard for a property owner who, like, it would have to be like a second time offense, like knowingly having rehired someone that broke the rules, because the first time they might not know. I think that's a little unfair.
I would be for property owner and landscaper. Vice Mayor Gallion?
To complete the exercise, I would say I would be for both being noticed, but I would like to have a ramp up. I don't think a fine should be incurred without having warnings first.
So I'm going to say no because we've had 16 in the last 6 months. I don't see it as adding it to the property owner. I think the folks at work, I think what's going to happen is as we build this, whatever ordinance is going to come out of this, is that people are going to be respectful of it, and they're going to do their jobs, and we're going to work together, and I'm going to continue to encourage people to talk to each other.
Hours of operation in commercial, residential?
Could I just make a quick point about that? The reason why we make those distinctions is because a 9 to 4 limit in a residential zone lets people have some quiet morning time and some quiet evening time, even if it doesn't give them the relief that they might be looking for during the day. That said, it's very feasible for the landscape contractor as well to perform during those hours of allowed activity. In a park setting, typically they try to do the work very early in the morning because the park often has people in it as the day wears on. And similarly, in the commercial settings, one of the major issues is cleaning the parking lot, which typically needs to occur either early or late. So that's the reason behind those distinctions.
So how should we touch the hours of operation?
Well, I think the question is, in light of the planning director's comment about hours of operation typically being different in commercial versus residential, I think addressing that issue first, and then addressing the question of if you want to narrow the hours in either category.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll start with that one. If we want to treat residential and commercial and public works separately and discuss hours of operation, and I would say yes. I would like to. Vice Mayor Gallion?
As the ordinance currently stands, we have residential, commercial, mixed use, and parks and public. I would like to keep that all separate.
Edwards?
I agree, keep it separate.
I agree.
Just wanted to interrupt for just 1 minute. So when it gets to, I mean, are we going to start talking about specific hours in the next step? It just seems a little bit arbitrary for us to just sit up here and just start like naming off times and things. What my first choice was going to be the band that I mentioned, but in the staff report, it had recommended getting the different sides together to talk about it. And when it comes to things like what time things happen, I feel like the landscape companies themselves could say what would be the most efficient time and what would be the window that they would need to get things done. And then perhaps the residents that have been involved can say the time windows when they don't want to be bothered, and then they can see if there's some sort of overlap between the groups that would make a time make sense rather than us just kind of throwing out numbers.
Yeah, and I think right now we're giving direction to staff, so there would be discussion at a next council meeting where the landscapers would be able to speak on that, possible, to see what makes sense. Yeah, so we're just giving feedback right now. So, Councilmember or Vice Mayor Gallion?
Well, I do believe that the prohibited hours, okay, if we were to work on that, I believe Sundays and city designated holidays are for residential. Commercial and mixed use, it's Saturday, Sundays, and city designated holidays. And for parks and public, it is Saturdays, Sundays, and city designated holidays. And I would be for keeping all of that.
I'm sorry, just clarification. The current hours as listed, you would be in favor of leaving them as they were proposed?
No, I'm saying that when leaf
days of the
blowers are
week.
not able to work.
Got it.
Councilmember Edwards?
I'm happy with the not allowed dates.
Agramonte?
I'm fine.
Hunley?
I'm outnumbered, but I would want to increase the number of days that they are prohibited.
Okay. I would keep I'd keep the days the way they are. So now we'll go ahead and we'll talk about residential hours. Right now, we're at 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Is there any suggestions? And we'll start with Edwards.
I think the 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. is fine. I mean, the only exception I would do would be maybe on Saturdays to trim a couple hours off. Would be okay with me.
Agramonte?
It's so funny to be called Agamani.
I just don't want to keep saying council member, but I will. Councilmember Agramonte.
That's, no.
You have a long name.
I know, it's so awful, isn't it? You should be in kindergarten, try to write that thing. Let me see. I'm okay with it, but we're on hours we're just at hours, right?
For
Monday-
residential.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Councilmember Hunley.
I do not have a suggested change, but I would be interested to hear from the public when this comes back.
I would like to see 10 to 2. Vice Mayor Gallion.
And I would like to see, if this comes back, I would only like to see 2 days a week that they're actually allowed to work.
I would also support 2 days a week. That's the number I had in my head.
Is there a third council member that would support that?
I feel okay with it, but I think another city has done different sections of the city. They've sectioned their city off. I think the city of Burlingame has sectioned their city off, so you wouldn't actually be in one area at a time. So I don't know if that overlaps that. I don't know.
Vice Mayor Gallion.
Just on a scheduling basis, you know, for landscapers to know one side of the city versus the other, I think that it would be difficult, you know, to go ahead and rotate the sections. But again, that's something that they could comment when we came back and say that they would prefer something different than that.
And I guess I would not support that because I would rather keep it the days the way they are. I think 10 to 2 would be restrictive enough.
Okay, that's fine. Just a suggestion.
Or no, I was just saying how I'd vote. That's just for the poll. Let's go ahead and go in commercial and mixed use, right?
I don't think we know what we're doing with either 10 to 2 versus 2 days a week. I think
I think
you
we had
lost
an-
us there.
Well, we had an indecision on that one. It wasn't a.
Okay.
We had a 2. We had a 2, but there was not a third vote to go for just 2 days.
Okay. So leave it as is for right
It
now.
just means it leaves it
Okay.
as is. So now we'll go to commercial and mixed use. At this moment, we have Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. Is there a suggestion? And it would go back to Councilmember Agramonte. Not to put you on the spot, you can always pass.
No, that's all right. Is it really 7 a.m. to 11 p.m.?
It is. It wakes me up.
That's why we're here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why you're here.
Well, you know, I know that they do the parking lots at Maxwell and those type of things. I don't know how that affects it, but I am not. I mean, I may be slippery on the 7 a.m., but never 11 p.m. I don't get that at all. I would say no, I wouldn't like that hour. And the 7 a.m., you know what? I'm going to say I don't like those, no.
Hunley, do you have a suggested hour of operation? Because if we all kind of suggest what hours we're within, then city staff will kind of know how to narrow that down.
Well, then I would say 9 to 6, then for commercials.
So I think this is the point that David was making a little bit, that you're pushing it into, and this is fine if that's what the council wants to do. I just wanted to point out that the question is whether you're pushing it into actual hours of operation of the businesses. So I think the reason that commercial and mixed use is, well, specifically commercial, I'm not sure about mixed use, but the commercial issues are that if the parking lot has cars in it and you start blowing stuff around with the cars in it, that you create a different problem. So I'm not quite sure whether you want to hit both ends of the day and push them into the middle when the parking lot is highly occupied.
Well, I think that's where we were heading as the council goes around, because I would say that I would rather see it done in the morning and then try to limit the night. So I would, if the way that I would do the straw poll vote is saying probably do like probably a 7 a.m. to, I don't know, probably 7 a.m. 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
And don't they use sweepers instead of blowers, the bigger places? Don't they?
Councilmember Hunley.
Some sort of reduced hours. I can't say what they are.
Councilmember Edwards, you have a question?
I grew up in the grocery business, and I work with a lot of folks that have grocery stores, and the reason why they have it at 11 a.m. is because there are no cars there. And to ask these guys to drive in at 7 a.m., drive around the parking lot while the workers are starting to show up and so on, and then they've got to go sit in traffic on their way to their next job, because I don't think the people who do this actually live in Sonoma. It's a business from Santa Rosa or somewhere else. So the idea of having it till 11 p.m., I mean, I don't know if there's anybody in the room here hears that truck at Maxwell or anywhere else at 11 p.m. It's a great time for that kind of work to be done. And it's often, there's a lot of maintenance is done after hours because there's less traffic, less liability for folks. And I would stick with the 11 p.m. I remember this from Planning Commission when these guidelines came along. So I just think it makes sense.
Vice Mayor Gallion.
I'd actually like to see if maybe we could query some commercial businesses that do this and find out what their hours of operations are, and then have staff bring it back to us.
There's only Maxwell, Safeway.
Sonoma Market.
Is there anything else that we've not?
Yeah, because I think we've maybe a little bit lost sight of what commercial means, and it may be that the council's asking for a split about this. Commercial, the way I understand the ordinance is currently comprised, it's by zoning district. David, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so commercial doesn't just mean I'll call them the strip commercial centers like Maxwell Village, etc. It means up and down Broadway, it means the square, it means all commercial zoning districts in the city. So you're sort of leaning over onto the question of what are we doing in parking lots, and yes, that's because what we've been talking about. But whatever these hours are that you apply, unless we somehow split up commercial into two different things, they're also going to apply in the plaza and in all commercial zoning districts in their surrounding areas, the fronts of the businesses, the sidewalks, etc. So I just wanted to point that out while we're having this discussion about commercial, because I think we're only looking at a tiny piece of the commercial pie in terms of what you've been discussing.
Vice Mayor Gallion.
Right, and you know, we're talking in this category, commercial and mixed use. So there is, you know, the opportunity for that as well. So I would just like to have a little bit more research into that as to why we arrived at what we actually have now and what could be better.
Especially if Gary said the Planning Commission actually looked at these hours, possibly. Maybe there's some information.
Is there any other direction?
Well, I mean, you might want to, I mean, just for the sake of completeness, you might want to take straw polls on a ban of gas-powered leaf blowers and a complete ban on all leaf blowers.
Okay. Can we go ahead and?
Oh, sorry, we haven't got public.
So I think we still have the Parks and Public Works to take up on the hours question, but then I agree with David. I think we haven't addressed the sort of base issue of, is anything falling into a ban, or are we trying to just get more restrictive?
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead and go into Parks and Public. Vice Mayor Gallion.
Well, I just have really seen that we had a comment tonight about bicyclists and pedestrians, and the bike path is one of those areas that's part of the public right-of-way. And I think I'm on record for talking about children walking to school at, you know, certain hours, and this 7 a.m. is problematic just around that time because some people are actually modeling to work in those areas. So again, when it comes down to parks and public, this is what we're maintaining as a city. So I would like to have direction from the Public Works Director as to how he feels he could adjust the hours concerning this particular process. And that's me.
Councilmember Edwards.
I mean, parks and public areas, that's why people come here. I mean, I think what we have now seems to be working. You know, adding restrictions on the park, you want it to be clean and ready to go for the day for folks, then not into the evening. And with the number of events and the restrictions of 104 days off a year already, not to mention public holidays and so on, I don't see that as an issue, and I don't know if there's been any complaints with the police chief or anyone else as far as public or city use of leaf blowers on the bike path. I have never heard of one, so.
Well, I think people who live along the bike path have complained about the leaf blowers.
And it's your turn, Councilmember
What
Agramonte.
would you like me to proclaim?
On the Parks and Public, right now it's 7 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Yeah,
Would you,
I'm comfortable with it.
Councilmember Hunley?
And I am with Vice Mayor Gallion. I'd like to hear from Public Works. Maybe they have a adjustment to suggest, but I haven't heard too many complaints about our people.
And I also agree with Vice Mayor Gallion and Councilmember Hunley on looking at Public Works and seeing what they have to say. Let's go ahead and do the most weighted vote tonight, the straw poll on banning gas leaf blowers. And any council member that would like to go first can go first. Councilmember Hunley.
I would like to ban gas-powered leaf blowers.
I would say no. I would not want to ban gas leaf blowers. Vice Mayor Gallion.
I want to ban all blowers, but particularly gas leaf blowers.
No.
Councilmember Agramonte.
You know, whatever way we move towards this, I still believe we need a transition period to be able to understand how the city is going to approach this issue, and I would say yes for the ban of gas leaf blowers.
So I have a question for the attorney. We have a straw vote of a quorum to ban gas leaf blowers.
Yes, I got 4-2 out of that.
No, 3-2.
3-2.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right, 3-2, sorry. Yes. I can't add.
So at this point, that takes all the restrictive straw polling. Well,
No, because those would have, the way I took it was the restrictive regulations would apply to,
all gas leaf blowers. Okay.
no, would apply to electric, and that gas would be complete.
Okay. So let's ask.
Did I misunderstand that?
Yeah. Let's ask for.
Okay.
Let's ask for a straw vote on electric leaf blowers. Sorry about that. We just talked about gas leaf blowers.
Right.
So now we're going to start with Vice Mayor Gallion on the ban of electric leaf blowers.
And I am for the ban on electric leaf blowers.
Councilmember Edwards.
Of course not. I'm not for a ban on electric leaf blowers.
Councilmember Agramonte.
I say yes, we'll ban on electric also.
Councilmember Hunley.
Well, why do we have that entire discussion up until now?
Because when we did the straw, what everybody discussed, it didn't sound like there was a quorum for banning gas and electric. So
I support a ban in residential, but I would like to work out a solution for public parks and the maintenance of them, given our very small staff. And I would also entertain a conversation about differences in some commercial properties that are a lot bigger. But
And I would be against the ban of electric leaf blowers.
So let's make sure I can add again, so, since I couldn't add before. So I think, here's what I heard. 3 for
Residential.
3 for banning electric and gas in residential. 2 against banning electric at all. And I think that's all we need to talk about right there, because then what that tells me is that the regulations that we talked about really were only concerned with the ones that deal with non-residential, because we don't care about the residential days and hours at all anymore if we're
Yes.
banning it totally in residential.
Correct. So now we need to go to commercial and mixed use and see if the council earlier talked about getting city staff, giving direction to city staff, if we should look at that to see what, if we split that in two, what is commercial and mixed use, where it could be separated.
Got it.
If my two colleagues on the council who voted do want to ban electric leaf blowers in commercial and mixed use.
Why don't we also try to legislate the wind from blowing over 5 miles an hour while we're at it?
So I actually think we, the question we're trying to call right now is the question of whether you want to try to split up commercial so that there are different rules applicable to larger commercial areas than, this was sort of what I heard, larger commercial areas versus smaller commercial areas in terms of perhaps extending hours in larger areas than smaller. I'm guessing that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, Councilmember Hunley.
So these are definitely things that I think that I would like to have a little more information about and to talk about more. I don't know, whatever the issues are that might come up, I just don't have them in my head right now, so.
So I think that's fair to ask staff to come back with some options on that particular issue after we've sort of thought it through. And the one additional thing that I think you still have on the table is a transition period, and I would characterize that more as an amortization period, essentially, a period of time before we would write these regulations, but they wouldn't actually go into effect until some date certain in the future, such that people could begin to phase out their gas blowers into electric for the purposes of commercial and parks, properties, and mixed use, et cetera. And so staff can come back with some suggestions about what that amortization period would be after looking at some other ordinances, or if council has suggestions, certainly we're open to hearing what those are.
Councilmember
And I
Aguilar.
think my thoughts included the enforcement, to be part of that transition, to enable the city manager and staff to look at this, whether it's the CSOs or whether they override into the different departments, how that might happen, as well as possible expenditures regarding the support of that.
Councilmember Edwards.
Carol, didn't we just approve the budget on the meeting of the 22nd?
Yes.
So
Yes.
with the $10,000 cost that we're talking about, we have council people talking about enforcement. Where is that money going to come from, or what other services are we going to cut?
Well,
to get that
that
money?
will be something that we'll have to determine the costs, and then we'll have to bring back a report to the council on, depending on when this transition period is going to happen, we will bring a report back to council, likely at mid-year, and request budget amendments, and most likely those costs will come out of city reserves.
Vice Mayor Gallion.
We did not discuss decibel level. Do we want to reduce it?
So I guess I'll answer first and then let David take over. I don't have enough information to be able to tell you what the quietest electric and or gas, I guess we've totally banned gas, so that's irrelevant, what the quietest electric operating leaf blower is, or what the range is. So at this point, I can't fathom that we could give you information on that issue without doing some additional research. I just don't know I don't know if you can even make it quieter and not effectively result in a de facto ban.
All right, so that's information that maybe I would like to see come back to us.
And I'll just go back and add, there's sort of two things that you've talked about with regard to this idea of phasing this in. And the first one is the issue of whether or not the ordinance will phase in. And the second has to do with whether or not, when we're talking about the enforcement provisions of this particular ordinance, whether there's a warning, sort of like a courtesy warning notice. Everybody gets sort of one, I hate to use this free bite at the apple, but I'll use that sort of one-time complaint-driven, okay, the first time you don't get this citation, you get a courtesy warning, and then the second time you get the citation.
I think that, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think that our vice mayors said that. You don't want, you'd like to give them, everybody a chance in the beginning, a notification that this is what's happening, not necessarily a fine.
Yeah.
I think that you said that.
You said that there would be more than, just a fine, that there would be a warning system.
So I was just looking for consensus on that particular issue. It sounds like
Well,
we have it, courtesy warning, and also some sort of phase-in period, and we'll bring that back to you with a suggestion.
Yes. Where it's just a grace period. And then, was there any other questions? Okay. Can you give me a review of what our straw poll?
David, do you want to go? You go. You do.
I'll give it a shot. There wasn't a consensus on changing the dates or the hours for the residential limits. There was no consensus on changing the dates or the hours of the, well, we're keeping the dates for the commercial, keeping the dates for parks, keeping the dates across the board. But in terms of hours, there was no consensus on residential, and the council directed staff to return with feedback from the city engineer with respect to parks and public.
Residential's irrelevant.
Well, we're still doing electric. I mean,
No.
or no, so, yeah, residential will be irrelevant. And feedback from the business community re commercial. There was interest in the permit process, but that may be overcome again if the council moves, depending on the nature of any bans that the council puts into place. And there was a 3-2 straw vote to ban gas-powered leaf blowers, 3-2 straw vote to ban electric leaf blowers, but with some interest in discussing whether or not that would extend to parks and larger commercial facilities. No?
Okay, so we actually do have a difference of opinion among staff. So I think, let me try. So total ban on gas in all zoning districts.
Yeah.
Ban on electric in residential zoning districts only. Leaf blower operator permit was a 4-1. Property owner plus operator citation, also again 4-1. Hours of operation in residential becomes moot. Hours of operation in commercial and parks was bring us more information. Days was keep as is, although there was some discussion about if we had additional information to bring it. A phase-in period for the ordinance as a whole, courtesy warning notice for property owners and commercial operators to be into the process itself so that they would get one warning. And now I think that's it. Was there?
Potentially bring back information on reducing decibel level.
Oh, and bring back information on reducing decibel levels, yes.
Okay, is there any other questions city staff would like us to poll? Okay. With that, do I have any other council discussion? And this does not have to go to a vote. Okay, and seeing, Councilmember Agamate.
And it might be irrelevant. I think it is irrelevant. I was asking about the chamber's packet for people doing business in Sonoma where there's something that they could put together. So I'm sure that the same rules might apply even though we've banned, the blowers. There's still going to be landscapers and contractors.
Yeah, we will work with the chamber through
It
our
might be irrelevant, but possibly it could be at some discount because they're going to order more. I don't know. It's just something that they know.
Yeah, we'll work with them through our economic vitality program.
Okay. With that, and I did want to mention that I did look up, there is a website for a buyback on gas-powered leaf blowers that, I don't know if city staff has record on that. If not, I can email that to you. Okay, with that, if my colleagues don't have any other questions.
Question, wasn't that stated as fact in the comments tonight, that there was a buyback program in place? So somebody in the room must have a confirmation on that in the actual...
Well, yeah, they actually sent it over to me, and I looked at it. That's why I was talking to city staff about, there's a buyback program.
And I think it was stated at full value.
So I would like that to just be mentioned so our landscaping community knows that that's available. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this discussion. And that will move us to council member reports and comments.
None from me.
Council member Hunley.
I had a few meetings this month. I met with the Sonoma County Mayor and Council Members Associated Legislative Committee, which keeps track of different state legislation that affects city rights. And it also gives me an opportunity to spend some time with some representatives of other cities, and actually several of them told me that they were looking forward to seeing what we were going to do tonight because they thought we could be the leader. So maybe everyone else will be following us. And then I also got to be the alternate for Sonoma Clean Power. The mayor let me go this month, and it was fascinating. I enjoyed it thoroughly. So if you ever want to give me your spot, I'll take it.
It's a fun one. Council member Edwards.
I don't need to comment on anything else tonight. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Gallion.
Just wanted to say what a wonderful job everyone did for 4th of July. It was a great event, and the fireworks, just a shout out to the firefighters for doing yet another wonderful job. And I can honestly say I felt that I was getting, double finale there, and thought that was just wonderful. And I appreciated it. I thought it was very interesting for them to go ahead and actually take out an ad in the local paper and thank those who made contributions. I only hope that this wonderful time-honored tradition continues from year to year. I attended the Sonoma County Transportation Authority meeting and also Regional Climate Protection Authority. The main topic of conversation is we had a representative from MTC. He was talking about the HOV lanes and, considering that in the event that we do not receive state dollars for transportation, would we consider actually looking at these lanes as being toll lanes? And that would be people could actually purchase or pay to play, as I call it, to ride in those lanes at a higher rate. And of course, this was quite a controversial subject since a lot of people, that are represented there, feel that we are taxed with our Measure M money for the taxpayers. Going ahead and enacting something like that would also increase it. We'd like to throw that idea to Marin, I'll be very bold here, and say that as we go through the Narrows portion of 101, perhaps that's something that they might consider, so that they could actually match some dollars to get our 101 completed all the way down through Marin, and we could end some of the bottleneck that we currently exhibit at this point. But that's truly a political statement. I just wanted to say I went to the Sonoma Community Center with a lot of other members here at the stakeholders meeting that was held, and found that to be very informative. I actually viewed a water webinar talking about the governor's issues concerning water in the state, and believe me, there is a lot of information going on there. A lot of groundwater is being talked about, the different committees there. I have my water meeting on August 2nd, so I'm looking forward to seeing how we are all faring in the county for our conservation levels. Good job to residents, because we came in, still under what we had done in 2013 for the month of June as well. these are particularly difficult days, and I know it's very hard when you look out at your landscapes and you look at yourself and say, boy, I feel just as dry as half of them. You know, that you're maintaining to still go ahead and water Monday nights, or Monday night through 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. and Thursday 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And, you know, for those of you who are up early, okay, hopefully not with the sound of a leaf blower, that is a particularly good time to water. And it's just a nice way to, you know, help our community. I will be attending the Chamber's social media workshop this Wednesday night, and who knows what I may become on social media after this. Mayors and council members meeting is August, second Thursday in August, and I will be attending that as well. And then we'll be back on council again.
And I just wanted to mention that thank you to Councilmember Hunley for going to Sonoma Clean Power. I appreciate it. It was her idea. I thought it would be nice for her to see what was going on in the room. And I did miss the lab meeting because I don't know if you saw the consent counter, but there was a lot of nominations I was at some interviews. And I did want to let public know that our next city council meeting, because we're going dark, the first meeting in August will be August 17th, I hear. And with that, we'll go to city council or city manager. City manager comments and announcements. You were speaking anyway, okay? You have none. With that, I will go ahead and open comments to the public.
Darrell Ponison again. I would just like to thank Ms. Huntley for cutting to the quick and giving you a great, simple approach, cost-benefit analysis for the landscapers, for public works, for the residents of Sonoma. And I'd like to say to you, Mr. Edwards, if a writer or an artist or a composer or an architect works at home and is having trouble working at home with the noise, that doesn't turn him into a commercial zone. That's not a commercial zone. It's still a residence. And the 16 complaints you referred to, you had more than 16 complaints tonight. The reason there are no complaints is, as I'm sure you know, nobody likes to call the cops. I've been through all this. You said there's lots of pollen in the air, there's lots of noise in the air. We're not talking about pollen in the air, we're talking about rat feces in the air. We're not talking about noise of traffic, we're talking about an amplified dentist drill, one of the worst noises around. And of course, we can't control the wind either, but I'm talking about a wind 300 miles per hour at my front gate. So bear that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the public? Mr. Kennard? Or?
Sure. Well, thank you for all your time tonight. But I'd like to direct this to Councilman Hunley. You seem to have a willingness to separate local government and residents. You talk about the city has a bit more land to take care of than the resident does. The city may also have more time to do it than the resident does. We may only have a few hours a week to do the work that we need to do. I also rent a piece of property and are part owner of a piece of property that are bigger than many of the small parks in the city of Sonoma. So why don't I have a right, same right as the city? You're driving at a division between government and residential. It's good for you and it's not for us. It will always create a problem, that division. We're all here equal. We're all created equal. It's the same dust. It's the same wind. So back to keeping things in mind and doing your research about reality here. We all don't hire it out, by the way. Talk tonight is only about landscapers. We're not all landscapers. We do things ourselves. Some of us actually do things. We don't have the time and the resources to hire and the money to hire it out. Think about those of us that actually do things ourselves. Some of us are still farmers. in this community. Some of us do things ourselves. I build and repair everything in the world that everybody says can't be done because I'm a doer. We're not all in the business of hiring it out to somebody else. I just wish you'd keep that in mind, come to some context of reality of the total picture that we have here. And the sooner that happens with all of you, the better we're all going to be. We're all in this together. It's the same dust no matter where it's stirred up, whether it's stirred up by a leaf blower or stirred up by the wind. Anyway, thank you all for all of your time tonight, and I hope you really educate yourself and make the right decision.
Food for thought, thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
I'd like to thank council tonight for all their hard work. I know this wasn't easy for any of you. I particularly like to thank Vice Mayor Gallion and Councilmember Hundley and Mr. Agramonte for taking the wise course and actually thinking about this. And Ms. Hundley, don't worry about being detached from reality. I think the three ladies up there are very well grounded in reality. And I want to thank you again for the progress it looks like we're making that will satisfy some of our commercial folks, and most important, satisfy the people that actually live in this city. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment?
I didn't realize we got to speak again, but Connie Rhodes again. Mr. Edwards, you suggested we speak to our neighbors. Oh, Connie Rhodes, R-H-O-D-E-S. I live on Donner Avenue, lived there for decades. I believe I've spoken to every single neighbor on my street about my concerns, and 2 homes behind me. And my life has become so miserable that I actually offered one of the neighbors behind me $200 per month to pay their landscaper to rake the leaves because they were blowing straight into planting beds, which, as a landscape person myself, I know is not best practices. Dust Bowl effect every single week after 4 o'clock, 4 years on Friday. And my life has become miserable every morning. I wake up and I look at the paper or the ads to move. And I am a 40-year resident of Sonoma. So I have spoken ad infinitum to my neighbors, and it has not helped, except for the 3 people on the block who agree with me. So I didn't want to waste time earlier stating that, but I just wanted you to be assured that many of us are speaking to our neighbors. Thank you.
Cecilia Ponison. Oh, you have it. Thank you. I, too, want to thank you all. And I want to tell Councilman Edwards, I haven't had the chance to meet you, so it's been a pleasure to hear you all speak tonight to all of our concerns. But in particular, Mr. Edwards, I tried to speak to a landscaper on one side of us. I offered to buy him a quiet battery-powered leaf blower because we live on 50-foot lots. And the law apparently here is that they're not supposed to blow within 50 feet of another residence. Well, that's pretty hard to do if you live on a 50-foot lot. My neighbor is a 50-foot lot on one side, same on the other side. I get half of their stuff, whatever it is. When they had their roof replaced, their roofers blew down upon us. It rained on us for 3 days. We had to leave. I don't know what's in those shingles, those 50-year-old shingles that came off their roof that we were now subjected to breathe. I already have a respiratory problem. This was life-threatening to me. But there was no way to ask those roofers to stop. They just ignored me. I had to leave. On the other side of me, after the meeting on the 13th, when the then mayor reneged on his vote because he cited a wonderful dinner he was given, the work of some landscapers, I won't say all, became punitive. I was not subjected to one leaf blower anymore. 2 and 3 at a time, on this property, on that property, on that property. Went on every week. That's what we've had to live with. Did they stop to be considerate after all that we did, after all the people we talked to at every single farmer's market, when we had family after family come up to us on those farmers markets of the whole summer of the 13th, 2013, telling us about their kids' respiratory problems? I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but if I talk a lot, I will lose my voice. Perhaps my husband appreciates that at times, maybe not. But I thank you, whatever your position, for listening to us. And if you know just that little bit, oh, one more thing. I tried to talk to a landscaper. He was blowing the sidewalk on the corner. I went up to him and I politely introduced myself, told him where I lived, told him I had a respiratory problem. If he wouldn't mind, I will sweep this whole street and corner. He flipped out and he turned his blower on me. I left. I felt attacked and threatened. And the next day I went to the homeowner, I took her flowers, and I apologized to her for upsetting her landscaper. And she said he was in quite a state. But anyway, that's my attempt to talk to people. It
Thank you.
hasn't worked out well. Thank you.
Georgia Kelly, thank you. Also, this is a lot of time. I had to go home and eat and come back. So I appreciate your just sitting there. One thing I wanted to bring attention to is since the last council dealt with this issue, one would have thought because there was so much commotion about this issue at the time that people would start using the blowers less because they knew a lot of people disagreed with the use of them entirely. And actually the opposite has happened. There is more leaf blower use now than there was 2 years ago, than there was a year ago. It's gotten so intense that no matter what neighborhood you go into, it's happening. Everyone I know, I have talked to neighbors, a lot of them signed the petition actually, except the one that uses a leaf blower. So, but everyone else in the neighborhood was opposed to it. But I think it's interesting to look at this, that restriction hasn't been working. It just doesn't work. There's more use now than there was 2 years ago. I think anyone in the city limits of Sonoma would verify that. So I really, again, would like to go back and urge a total ban, city property, residential property, all property in the city limits of Sonoma. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting.